Chapter 265. Kobayashi, are we unable to escape? Junko's voice was filled with despair. Princess, don't worry. As long as Kobayashi is alive, I will never let anyone hurt you. Kobayashi didn't answer the question directly, but said with determination. Well, maybe this is the will of God. Kobayashi, you don't have to worry about me. If possible, just kill your way out and tell my father the news. Junko's voice suddenly had a hint of indifference and relief. Ever since she was born, all she saw was her father sighing. From then on, she swore to herself that she would grow up quickly and help her father. After so many years, she had been working hard for this goal. But in the end, she was still a woman. Although she was beautiful, she didn't have any effect on the overall situation. Now, she was finally going to die. Perhaps this was the best explanation she could give to her father. A sharp dagger suddenly appeared in Junko's right hand. This was her self-defense weapon, but at the critical moment, it was also a suicide weapon. Even if she died, she wanted to die cleanly. She couldn't let other men sully her body. Princess, don't. Seeing Junko even took out a dagger, Kobayashi's face showed a strong struggle. Kobayashi, don't say any more. Even if I die, I won't let others have me. You don't have to worry about me. Just rush out. That way, I can die in peace. Junko seemed to want to let Kobayashi rest assured. She decided to end her life in advance. While speaking, the dagger was already moving towards her neck. The dagger was a gift from the Japanese imperial family. It was one of the tributes sent by others. Naturally, there was no problem with its sharpness. As long as she moved it towards her neck, everything would be over. At this moment, there was a trace of a smile on Junko's face. She seemed to have seen the beautiful door of heaven open, and the angel was waving to her. Bang! Just as the dagger was about to reach his neck, when the distance was less than 10 centimeters, a crisp gunshot rang out. It was so crisp and ear-splitting in this silent night. After the gunshot, the dagger was directly hit. The powerful impact directly shook Junko's right hand, and the dagger naturally fell to the ground. You are my people. This young master didn't agree, so you can't die. Along with the gunshot, a masculine voice sounded. And from the direction of the voice, a group of mercenaries holding torches appeared behind Junko and Kobayashi. It's the East Commander. Upon hearing this voice and seeing this scene, Kobayashi couldn't help but exclaim. In the past, he hated Yang Qindong very much, because this person had stolen the heart of his goddess. If it wasn't for his lack of strength, he would have assassinated Yang Qindong long ago. But now, his thoughts were completely different. At this moment, Yang Qindong's appearance was undoubtedly a savior who could save his goddess from the hands of death. Even Kobayashi was so excited, let alone Junko. The dagger fell to the ground, and her palm was bleeding. All of this could no longer attract Junko's attention. There was only one sentence in her mind. You are my people. This young master didn't agree, so you can't die. What does he mean? What does he mean by I am his people? Isn't he worried about my identity as a Japanese? The other men of the great Ming dynasty avoided her. Does he dare to face the difficulties head-on? What is he thinking? During the day, her identity was made public, and Junko's image and status in the Yang family academy fell by 1,000 miles. Those men of the great Ming dynasty who used to pursue her all expressed that they were thousands of miles away from her, which made Junko very sad. It also made her understand that with her identity, she could only marry the great Ming dynasty's royal family as a concubine and become a dispensable vase. But it was absolutely impossible for her to live with a man of the great Ming dynasty. Not for anything else, but because she was a Japanese. At that time, under the relatively backward and feudal thinking, no man of the great Ming dynasty would dare to marry her. It was because she couldn't see any hope and knew that Kimura Yoshida was coming that she made the decision to leave the Yang family village. Although she was very happy living here, she would never belong here. But when she was disheartened, Yang Qindong said that she was his people, which made her originally dead heart burn again, as if she saw a new hope. At this moment, Junko's heart was in a mess. At this moment of life and death, she was stunned, as if she didn't know that she was on the verge of death. A gunshot broke the silence of the night and made the ninjas on the opposite side vigilant. Rush over and kill them. One of the 3 high-level ninjas suddenly shouted in Japanese, and then dozens of black shadows quickly approached, rushing straight toward Yang Chendong and the others. Shoot at will. Tiger's Mane, who was leading the team, saw the black shadows quickly approaching and decisively gave the order to attack. Following this voice, the sound of gunfire could be heard, drawing out a bright meteor as it rushed forward. Kobayashi, protect Miss Junko. Yang Chendong also shouted, and the pistol in his right hand shot a bright bullet forward. Kobayashi was shouted and immediately threw Junko to the ground, so that she wouldn't be disturbed by the stray bullets. As he fell to the ground, he looked up and saw the ninjas in black getting hit by bullets one after another. Blood splattered everywhere as they fell to the ground and died. This was the first time that Kobayashi saw the power of advanced firearms at such a close distance. When he saw that the ninjas, who were known as ghosts and ghosts, were so vulnerable, there was only panic and shock in his eyes. He suddenly felt that all the martial arts he had painstakingly learned in the past were useless. In the face of such an advanced and accurate firearm, it seemed that no matter how strong one's martial arts were, it would be useless. Baka. Rush over and kill them in close combat. Seeing that a ninja was hit by a gun and fell to the ground and lost his life, the leading ninja's voice was filled with monstrous anger. While giving the order loudly, he also moved quickly, and at the same time, his right hand was constantly throwing ninja dart, which was used for long-range attacks. The ninja dart broke through the air and flew forward. Yang Chendong, who was standing in the middle of the team, had a trace of indifference in his eyes, and shouted, "All of you, throw away your torches, and be on your guard." The ninja dart's power at close range was not inferior to firearms. This was something that Yang Chendong had experienced as early as in his last life. It's just that at that time, ninjas were almost extinct, and there were very few people who could use ninja dart. But now, when he returned to the Great Ming Dynasty, he actually saw such a thing again, which really gave him a headache. When modern firearms face cold weapons, the advantage is naturally very obvious. But it can't be said that there are no disadvantages. For example, in close combat, the effect of firearms becomes very poor, and in order to prevent self-injury, you have to be careful when shooting, which is equivalent to giving the opponent more opportunities and space to use their abilities. It was precisely because he recognized the power of ninja dart that Yang Chendong made some preparations in advance. It's just that he didn't expect that the opponent would use ninja dart so decisively, which caught him off guard. After the shout, the well-trained Lingfeng soldiers threw out the torches in their hands, and the originally bright place suddenly turned into darkness. But this order was given a little too late, and there were still 4 or 5 muffled groans in the darkness. Needless to say, the Lingfeng soldiers were injured by the dart. This was the first time that the Lingfeng soldiers were injured during a mission. What's more, in the darkness, the ninjas' speed of approaching was even faster, as if they were even more certain of their home ground. Be careful, don't shoot casually. Yang Chendong's voice had a trace of fear. Just as he finished speaking, he felt a gust of cold wind coming towards him. Instinctively, he used his feet as an axis and his body quickly fell backward. But just as his body leaned back, the wind from the blade brushed past his body. It's conceivable that if he was a little slower, he would have been injured. Young master, be careful. Seeing that Yang Chendong was almost killed, Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei's voice quickly sounded, and then 2 figures quickly approached him. I'm fine, be careful. After Yang Chendong regained his balance, he replied, pulled out the triage bayonet from his waist, and then suddenly stabbed the black shadow in front of him. What Yang Chendong had learned was not some fancy moves, nor was it a routine. Instead, it was a killing move. It's often the fastest way to kill the opponent in the shortest time. At this moment, he just instinctively attacked, and before the ninja on the opposite side could see what was going on, he was stabbed in the heart. The moment the triage bayonet was pulled out, blood suddenly gushed out, and the ninja fell to the ground with a plop. Baka, let's attack together, don't leave a single one alive. The leader of the ninjas saw the scene of his subordinates being killed and roared with fire in his eyes. If they were just using firearms to kill them, he could still find a reason to do so. But the fact that the ninjas were so weak in close combat made him unable to bear it, and in a fit of anger, he ordered all the ninjas to attack. Under this order, dozens of shadows rushed forward in the darkness. It can be seen that at this moment, the ninjas didn't hold anything back, and all of them attacked. Chapter 266. Good timing. Seeing that the number of enemies had increased, Yang Chendong wasn't anxious, instead, he was happy. He seemed to have been waiting for this moment. Tiger's mane, use the flash bomb. As soon as the words fell, a dazzling pure white light flew into the air, and then the entire area was illuminated as if it was daytime. The sudden appearance of this light in the dark caught everyone off guard. The ninjas who were rushing over didn't even have time to react to what happened. They only saw the light in front of them, and in an instant, they had a feeling of blindness. It was at this time, Qiu V's first guard team emerged from the layers of protection of Ling Feng. When they appeared, each of them held a 9mm assault rifle. The Type 95-5. 8mm light machine gun is the light machine gun of the Type 95 squad gun family. It and the Type 95 automatic rifle form the squad gun family, and now it is gradually being equipped to the army. The automatic parts of the gun family are all universal, and a large proportion of the parts are universal between rifles and light machine guns. The gun uses a holdless structure. The automatic mode is pneumatic type, and the head rotates and locks. It can fire single and continuous shots. The ammunition is supplied with 30 rounds of plastic magazine and 75 rounds of rapid reloading drum. The mechanical aiming device is a keyhole type. It is equipped with a muzzle device to reduce noise and flame. Caliber, 5, 8mm, muzzle speed, 970 meters per second, gun weight, 3, 95 kilograms, gun length, 840 millimeters, bullet capacity, 75, effective range, 600 m. The gun weighs 3.95 kilograms, excluding the drum, the gun is 0.84 m long, the effective range is 600 m, and the gun is supplied with 75 rounds of ammunition. This is the killing weapon that Yang Chendong prepared after entering Daikara. As everyone knows, ninjas have always been very fast. They are so fast that when they run, they can burst out the limit of the human body, and they can even create afterimages. Facing this kind of speed, it is very difficult to catch them just by relying on the Type 95 single shot. The flash bomb's element of surprise can indeed provide a suitable opportunity for Ling Feng to make his move. But if he doesn't grasp it well, this kind of opportunity will be wasted. The enemy will be prepared, and it will be even more difficult to achieve the element of surprise. Yang Chendong was thinking about how to seize the opportunity when there was one. Therefore, Class 95's machine gun was brought out. It had 75 bullets and a firing speed of nearly 1,000 meters per second. Very few people could survive such a firearm. Therefore, the on-duty machine gun was taken out, and along with the sound of gunfire, a series of continuous gunshots rang out. The oncoming ninjas in black clothes were like wheat fields blown by a strong wind, like chives cut by a sharp knife, crazily falling to the ground. The instant they fell to the ground, blood burst out from their bodies. In the end, each and every one of them fell to the ground with an unwilling expression. Jenin and Chunin were caught off guard. None of them were spared. They became live targets and were shot to death. On the other hand, the three Jonins reacted very quickly, and because they were hiding behind the other ninjas, when facing the machine gun fire, only one of them was hit and fell to the ground and died. The other two were lucky enough to survive, and at the same time, they rushed to Yang Chendong's location. This time, they came to receive two missions. The first was to snatch the princess, Kohara Junko. The second was to kill Yang Chendong, the Duke of Loyalty. Being surrounded by so many people, it was impossible to snatch the princess away. They could only try their best to complete the second mission, which was to kill Yang Qindong. Even if they died, it would be worth it. Kid, you're courting death. Seeing that the ninjas were still unwilling to give up and wanted to threaten the young master, Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei shouted respectively and faced the two ninjas. With them here, they would never allow anyone to harm the young master. Hu Mang took a few large steps forward and blocked a superior ninja. He pulled out the Ben Edge army thorn from his body and faced the ninja blade that also seemed to be sharp. The moment the two of them met, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The other members of the cold front could only see dazzling lights and shadows. On the other side, Beta Persei also blocked another Jonin with his strong and tall body. It's just that he was not used to using weapons. When facing the sharp ninja's sword, he could only take step by step back and look for the opponent's flaws to counterattack. After retreating 5 steps, Yang Er stretched out his long arm, wanting to take advantage of his long body to snatch the ninja sword from his opponent. But at this time, the situation suddenly changed. The Jonin who was in front of him suddenly disappeared without a trace. Ninjas were very fast, and this was the first time Yang Er came into contact with them, so when he found that his opponent was gone, he had a bad feeling in his heart, and the first thing he did was to look at his young master's position. And the worrying scene was playing out. The Jonin who had just disappeared had already come in front of Yang Qindong and handed the ninja's sword forward. The blade with a cold intent went straight to Yang Qindong's chest. It was so fast that many people only saw the shadow of the blade. Looking at this scene, Junko was so scared that she almost fainted and shouted, "No!" After that, her whole body staggered backward. Fortunately, Kobayashi had been paying attention to her and reached out to support her in time. She didn't fall to the ground and suffer any injuries. As for Yang Qindong, the sudden appearance of the blade went straight to his chest. His eyes suddenly narrowed, and then at the same time, his body in an incredible way suddenly moved to the side, letting the tip of the ninja's sword brush past his clothes. If this scene was recorded, it would be surprising to find that the tip of the sword was only a millimeter away from Yang Qindong's clothes. After his body suddenly moved to the side and avoided the attack of the sword, Yang Qindong didn't even look at it and kicked it vigorously. This kick almost burst out with 80% of Yang Qindong's strength. This blow accurately kicked the blade of the ninja's sword. The powerful force made the ninja's arm numb, and then the ninja's sword was kicked into the air. Without a weapon in his hand, the ninja's momentum couldn't help but weaken. At this moment, Beta Persei finally arrived. He roared and rushed over, then without any scruples, he used his huge body to hit the ninja's body. Bang! Under the powerful impact, the ninja's flexible but thin body flew upside down like a kite with a broken string. As he flew backwards, he spat out a mouthful of blood that splattered all over the ground. His body also turned into an arc and heavily fell to the ground. Young master, Beta Persei is guilty. His nearly 2-meter-tall body fell to the ground with a plop, kneeling in front of Yang Qindong, causing the ground to tremble as if it had been greatly shaken. Dong Shui, are you okay? Seeing that the situation seemed to be stable, Junko also broke away from Kobayashi's protection and hurriedly ran to Yang Qindong, then asked with concern. I'm fine. Yang Qindong looked at Junko's bright and beautiful eyes and said. But just after he finished speaking, his eyes suddenly revealed a murderous aura, and then his body suddenly rotated, picking up Junko and dancing in the air. Junko was picked up, her feet were off the ground, and she felt as if her whole body was flying at this moment. And in the process of rotating, 3 shiny ninja darts were shot toward her body. Junko, who didn't understand why Yang Qindong suddenly picked her up, finally understood that this was the last attack launched by the fallen ninja. He wanted to kill her. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, she clearly heard the feeling of the dart entering her body. Then she noticed that Yang Qindong, who was holding her, had a tight face and slightly wrinkled eyebrows. It was obvious that he was hit by the dart. Ah! Yang Qindong was hit by a dart in order to save her. At this moment, Junko couldn't stop her tears from flowing out. If it was Kobayashi who did this, she wouldn't feel the slightest bit surprised. Since he was a guard, he should be prepared to protect his master with his life. But the one who saved her was Yang Qindong, so she was moved to tears. He was the Dong Shui. He was the loyal and courageous duke of the great Ming dynasty. He was the youngest noble in the great Ming dynasty, and also a newly risen noble. He had an uncountable amount of wealth, loyal and powerful subordinates, for beautiful wives who were loved by everyone, and why did he save her? He still had a great youth, he still had a bright future, and he didn't even have a descendant until now. How could he, as the princess of the Japanese royal family, she knows a lot about ninjas, even if she doesn't know them very well. Most of the ninja darts were stained with poison. Once thrown out, it would enter the body. Unless the antidote could be immediately obtained, otherwise, it would be a dead end. This was also the reason why ninjas were feared. Under normal circumstances, ninjas would complete certain death missions, and it was absolutely impossible for them to carry the antidote with them. In other words, Yang Qindong was hit by a ninja dart, and it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to survive. Junko's face was full of worry. After Yang Qindong's body trembled, he put her down. Immediately, Junko's shout rang in his ears. No! You can't die. It's not worth it for you to do this for me. Junko, who was crying like a pear blossom, tightly hugged Yang Qindong's waist. She looked really pitiful. It's a life, why isn't it worth it? Yang Qindong looked at Junko's crying face and reached out his right hand to gently wipe her tears. It's just not worth it. I'm just a woman, and you have a great future. It's not worth sacrificing you to save you. Junko continued to cry. Chapter 267. No. You are not a woman, you are a very beautiful woman, a woman who can make people's hearts beat. Yang Qindong looked at Junko's big eyes and said softly. You like me? Junko suddenly understood something, and looked at Yang Qindong with a hint of gentleness. Yes, do you like me? Yang Qindong bravely admitted, then looked at Junko and asked seriously. In Yang Qindong's eyes, Junko was not only cute and beautiful, but also had a tenacious character that deeply attracted him. Especially when he knew that this woman learned a lot of knowledge and suffered a lot of unimaginable pain in order to strengthen the Japanese royal family, he felt even more distressed. Such a beautiful girl should be protected, instead of fighting like a man, or even risking her life. Junko didn't know how to answer for a moment, and her eyes flashed with a hint of panic. She was taught from a young age that she couldn't easily like a person, because she had a very important mission, and before she completed her mission, she couldn't easily say the word love. Seeing that Junko was avoiding something, Yang Qindong knew that she still had a psychological barrier, and if he couldn't take this opportunity to break through, it would be even more difficult to make her reveal her true feelings next time. For this reason, he continued to ask, "What's wrong? Even now, can't you tell me the truth?" I like you too." After being reminded, Junko suddenly remembered that Yang Qindong had been poisoned by the ninja dart, and perhaps he wouldn't be able to live happily. At this time, what was the point of confessing her true feelings to him? "I like you too." Finally, Junko's psychological barrier was broken under this special circumstance. She said to Yang Qindong, "I like you, and I have liked you since a long time ago. Even if you have other women, I am willing to be one of them, but, alright, that's enough." Hearing Junko's confession, Yang Qindong nodded with satisfaction. He then released his hand from Junko's slender waist, turned around and walked towards the jonin who was groaning on the ground. Yang Qindong walked in front of the jonin, and a handgun appeared in his hand. With a slight movement of his right index finger, a gunshot was heard, and a bloody hole appeared in between the jonin's eyebrows. Blood was flowing out non-stop. After finishing off the jonin who threw the ninja dart, Yang Qindong slowly turned his head and looked at Beta Persei and said, "I have taught you more than once that being merciful to the opponent is being cruel to ourselves. But just now, this man who was about to die launched his final attack and almost took your young master's life. This time, all of you are at fault. Do you know your crimes?" His voice was loud and clear, especially in this silent night, it spread far and wide, and it clearly drilled into the ears of every Lingfeng. We are guilty. The sound of people kneeling on the ground was heard. Whether it was Beta Persei, Tiger's Mane who just killed a Jonin, Chiu V, and the others from the first guard, or the Lingfeng who came out to carry out the mission, they all knelt on the ground in an orderly manner. Everyone's eyes flashed with shame and regret. Yang Qindong didn't seem to be satisfied with everyone kneeling down and admitting their mistakes, nor did he intend to forgive them. Instead, he continued to say, "Today's matter will be written in the history of Lingfeng, and it will make all future generations vigilant. It's an honor that every one of your names will be recorded in the history of Lingfeng. This may be a disgrace, but since you are following this young master, you have to do your best. If you don't have the ability to do so, or if you don't have enough self-awareness, then you can apply to leave. This young master won't force you. Now, go and kill all those assassins. Remember, it's not a disgrace to kill a dead person or someone who is about to die. On the contrary, it's a way to take responsibility for yourself and respect your opponent. Do you understand?" "Understood." Dozens of people answered in unison. Although the effect of the flare had already worn off, the place returned to darkness. But everyone still lowered their heads in shame. Today, their names will be remembered by future generations, and they will be written in the list of shame. This kind of action was equivalent to taking half of their lives. Some people even had the idea of not wanting to live anymore, and wanted to die to show their loyalty. But in the end, they didn't do so, because everyone knew that running away was the behavior of the weak. The real strong weren't afraid of failure. They should face it head-on, then correct, and become stronger. After being reprimanded, Tiger's Mane and others quickly took action, and all the ninjas who had been dead for a while on the ground were stabbed. All the corpses were almost poked at this moment, and the smell of blood filled the air for a while, but no one showed mercy or even sympathy. Everything was as the young master had said. Being merciful to the enemy was being cruel to oneself. Looking at everyone's actions, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with a gratified look. These people have been with him for a long time, and it was inevitable that they would become arrogant and willful. It was necessary to teach them a lesson at the right time. Not to mention, today's matter was really dangerous. If he hadn't been prepared in advance and wore a bulletproof vest, Yang Qindong's life would have been taken by the poisonous dart just now. Leng Feng's performance made Yang Qindong satisfied and relieved him. But Junko, who had just confessed, was still looking at Yang Qindong with an incredulous look. Perhaps she thought that this Dong Shui would die after being hit by the poison dart. That was why she was very surprised to see him talking so confidently as if nothing had happened. "What's wrong? Do you want something to happen to me?" Yang Qindong had already arrived in front of Junko, and when he saw her expression of disbelief, he asked with a magnetic and caring voice. "You? How can you be fine? Didn't you just get hit by the poisonous dart?" Junko asked instinctively, blinking her big eyes, looking forward to Yang Qindong's explanation. Yang Qindong never liked to explain. Because only when he did something wrong, he would explain, and only when he faced stupid people would he explain. First, he didn't do anything wrong, and second, Junko was very smart, so such an explanation was even more unnecessary. "Idiot, how can a small poisonous dart hurt this young master? You should have heard of my legend, I am the god of war, invincible. But you, why did you suddenly leave Yang village without even saying goodbye? Do you know, if I didn't find out that you were gone and brought people here in time, I'm afraid you would be dead now." While talking, Yang Qindong slowly approached. When the distance between them was less than an arm's length, he squatted down slightly, stretched out his hands, and abruptly lifted Junko up into the air. Her body suddenly left the ground. This change surprised Junko, who was still in the state of thinking. From childhood to adulthood, the only one who dared to do this to her was her father. Now being carried by Yang Qindong, who was only a few years older than her and was also young, it would be strange if she didn't shout in surprise. Just as she shouted, before she could do anything to struggle, Yang Qindong's caring voice sounded in her ears. "It's so cold, but you're still wearing so little, aren't you afraid of getting sick?" All right, my embrace is still warm. Now, you just have to stay in there obediently. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Chendong took large strides and turned around, heading in the direction of the Yang family manor. On both sides of him were Captain Xiao Vi and the members of the First Guard Squad. Such a scene, such an atmosphere, made Junko, who originally wanted to struggle, forget everything. Because Yang Chendong's arms were so warm that she couldn't bear to leave. More importantly, she found that she actually liked this feeling, this temperature, this breath. Junko didn't make any struggle, letting Yang Chendong carry her to Yang village. Kobayashi, who was behind her, didn't have such good treatment. Beta Persei strode in front of him with a fierce face. Do you want to walk on your own, or do you want me to carry you? I'll walk on my own. Kobayashi felt the strong anger coming from Beta Persei's body. He had already experienced this person's power, so he was really afraid. He was really afraid that if he answered a little slower, the other party would heavily injure him and then carry him back to Yang village. In that case, even if he was lucky enough to not die, he would probably lose a layer of skin. Tiger's Mane and the Leng Feng stayed behind to clean up the battlefield. This was also something that the elite Leng Feng were very good at. Soon, a big pit appeared, and the bodies of the 43 ninjas were buried in the ground. When the soil was finally covered, after a night of cold wind, it would be difficult to find this place. After only half an hour, the originally lively place became quiet again. When the wind blew, the place returned to the silence of the night. The Japanese diplomatic mission in the capital. The sky was almost bright, but there was still no news. Kimura Yoshida was furious. He raised his hand and slapped Captain Qi Shang's face. He roared angrily, "What the hell is going on? Why did you send so many people, but none of them came back? Give me an explanation." Yes. Qi Shang lowered his head and answered, but his face showed that he was very wronged. This was Kimura's plan, and he was the one who sent the ninjas. Now he was asked to explain. What could he say? What could he explain? Investigate, send someone to investigate. I want to know where these people went. I want to know if Yang village still exists. Kimura Yoshida's angry voice continued to sound. Qi Shang left the room as if he had been granted amnesty, and then a large number of people were sent out. As soon as the gate opened, they would go out of the city to investigate and inquire about the news. For the matter of 43 ninjas disappearing without any reason, even Ikigami was very curious. Chapter 268. The attack of the ninjas was originally a secret. Even he was the last to know about it. Then who was it that leaked the news? Let them all be wiped out, and none of them return. Also, what kind of existence was Yangjia village? Why did they always suffer heavy losses every time they dealt with this loyal prince? What was even worse was that the appearance of the ninjas couldn't be told to the outside world. In other words, whether these ninjas were all killed or not, he couldn't reason with the great Ming dynasty as an envoy of Japan. After arranging for Qi Shang to investigate the disappearance of the ninjas, Kimura Yoshida went straight to the Ministry of Rights in a palanquin. Today, the great Ming dynasty was still in its prosperous period. As for Japan, it was still a huge monster. But this didn't mean that they didn't dare to speak to the strong. On the other hand, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who stood behind Kimura Yoshida, belonged to the hardline faction. Perhaps it was because they grew up in Japan, they were used to being short-sighted. They were used to thinking that everything revolved around them. With this thought in mind, Kimura Yoshida was instructed before this trip. He must return to Princess Junko. For this purpose, he could even threaten the great Ming dynasty. Under the policy of banning the sea, not long after the great Ming dynasty was defeated by the Walla, the great Ming dynasty was divided into two. He was confident that the great Ming dynasty wouldn't be willing to offend them and treat them as enemies. In the Ministry of Rights, the chief official on duty today was Left Assistant Minister He Wenyuan. He became a scholar when he was young, and then he finally stepped on the path of Jinshi. He became one of the representatives of scholars and one of the supporters of Confucianism. He was still very principled. When He Wenyuan saw the arrogant Kimura Yoshida in the reception room and learned that this person actually asked the Great Ming Dynasty to unconditionally release the previous envoy Aoki Yuki and return the Japanese merchants who were imprisoned in Xianxia village to them, He Wenyuan's face became very ugly. Emissary Mu, Emissary Greenwood committed a crime in the capital of my Great Ming, almost injuring an important official of my Great Ming. The implications of this matter are too great for me to say anything about, so it's best not to speak of it. As for your second request, I don't know what's going on with that Japanese businessman you mentioned. However, as far as I know, there aren't any merchants imprisoned in Yang Manor. I'm very suspicious of the reliability and veracity of your source of information. Faced with the aggressive Kimura Yoshida, He Wenyuan retorted. Putting aside the fact that Yang Chendong's writing style was excellent, He Wenyuan admired it. With Dong Shuai's reputation alone, why would he need to confine anyone? Not to mention that he was a merchant from another race. If it had been someone else, it would have been possible. After all, businessmen were rich, and they could always get some benefits by capturing them. But does Dong Shuai lack money? Baka, are you doubting my words? Do you not believe me? Being blocked by He Wenyuan's words, Kimura Yoshida was naturally very angry, and his tone naturally carried the fire of anger. This isn't a matter of whether I believe you or not. This official is only speaking based on the facts. Since you don't have any evidence, forgive this official for being unable to believe your words. Also, please pay attention to your wording. As far as I know, the word baka doesn't mean anything good, right? He Wenyuan didn't understand Japanese, but looking at Kimura Yoshida's expression, he guessed that it shouldn't be something good, so he reminded him. Here, it has to be said that the ancient people of China were broad-minded. They always regarded themselves as a great country, and in accordance with the principle of broad-mindedness, they rarely did anything aggressive. When they were strong, their opponents would often submit to them and pay tribute, and the dirty things they had done before would be forgotten. And once China entered a period of weakness, those small countries that once seemed obedient would jump out one by one, wanting to get a share of the benefits. Under the cycle, the country's territory was getting smaller and smaller, and the feeling it gave people was getting more and more kind. Because Kimura Yoshida understood this, he wasn't afraid of the Great Ming. First, he would scare them to achieve his goal. If the tough method didn't work, he would bow his head and admit his mistake, and there would be no danger. How could a country that forbade the sea pose a threat to Japan, which was surrounded by the sea? With this in mind, Kimura Yoshida naturally didn't take He Wenyuan's reminder seriously. On the contrary, his eyes narrowed, and a cold light flashed in them. Assistant Minister this ambassador received the order of our Emperor and General Ashikaga Yoshimasa to bring the Japanese businesswoman back to Japan. In order to achieve this goal, we have prepared everything. Do you know everything? If you refuse to hand her over, it will be a contempt to our country, and this is something that our Emperor and General can't allow. If you must do this, then we don't mind gathering thousands of warships. When the time comes, if the army really presses on the border, I don't know if the newly ascended Emperor can withstand it. The more Kimura Yoshida spoke, the more ruthless and murderous Kimura Yoshida's voice became. When He Wenyuan heard these words, he trembled all over. Scholars rely on their knowledge and mouth, and they are not proficient in things like war. Otherwise, the ancient people wouldn't have left behind a famous saying, when a scholar meets a soldier, it's impossible to reason with him. Kimura Yoshida suddenly said that they might declare war on the Great Ming because of this matter, which made He Wenyuan realize the importance of this matter. At this moment, this matter was not something he could handle. After a moment of hesitation, he replied, "All right, I understand your request. I will report this matter to our Emperor. At the very least, I'll have to ask the envoy to wait for 2 days to see what the outcome will be." Seeing that the threat seemed to be effective, Kimura Yoshida nodded happily. "All right, this envoy will wait for news from your country, but please hurry. After all, this envoy has a good temper, but it doesn't mean that our Emperor and General have the same temper." The meeting was over. Kimura Yoshida left the Ministry of Rights Yamen with a smug look on his face. Soon, He Wenyuan's sedan also left the Yamen and went straight to Minister Hu Zhao's residence. He Wenyuan's sudden visit made Hu Shao, who was resting at home, change into an official's robe and receive the guest in the main hall. Needless to say, Hu Shao could feel that something big must have happened for the left assistant minister to come in such a hurry. Sure enough, when He Wenyuan explained his meeting with Kimura Yoshida in detail, Hu Zhao's eyes wrinkled. According to the ancestral teachings of the Great Ming, that is, the Great Emperor Yongle, Zhu Di, the Great Emperor of the Ming Dynasty, personally led his troops on a 10,000-li expedition to sweep away the Desert Empress for the second time and return to the imperial court in Beijing. Our dynasty's national power is supreme, it surpasses the ancient times. It controls the north, invades the west, the south, the west, and the barbarians of the west. These words were, no marriage, no reparations, no ceding of land, and no tribute. There was also the meaning of the emperor guarding the country and the emperor dying for the country. It was just that the Great Ming was now divided into two and had just fought a great battle with the Walla. It could be said that the Great Ming had suffered heavy losses, and the elites were all dead. Although the military recruitment had now begun, it would take time to recover to its peak. At this moment, if Japan attacked the border at sea, it would undoubtedly be a headache for the Daizong Emperor. We can't fight. Hu Shao hesitated for a moment before giving an answer that was close to the bottom line. This answer was not different from He Wenyuan's. He also did not want to have any friction with Japan. If he backed down, he would have to agree to the other party's demands and conditions. Since this matter involved the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, he was powerless to do anything about it. Therefore, he explained, Minister, no matter what, since this matter has happened, we should first report it to the Emperor and inform the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. In the end, this was He Wenyuan's real intention. Using the opportunity of reporting to the Emperor, he expressed a certain amount of goodwill to Yang Chendong. Naturally, this favor would not be small. That's right. Hu Shao had been an official for many years, so how could he not understand? He immediately understood and nodded with a smile. I will go to the palace to meet the Emperor and send someone to inform the Duke of Loyalty. Minister He, please go back first. The Ministry of Rights still needs someone to be on duty. Yes, Minister. Since he had sent out his goodwill, He Wenyuan naturally should also leave. After the two of them greeted each other, they went their separate ways. Imperial Palace Main Hall. Hu Shao was standing in front of the Daizong Emperor, Zhu Qiyu, and recounted everything that He Wenyuan had reported. After he finished speaking, he quickly closed his mouth. The Emperor needed time to think, and as an official, he only needed to report the matter. As for how to deal with it, it would be up to the Emperor to decide. How dare you! After listening to Hu Zhao's explanation, Zhu Qiyu immediately slammed the dragon table angrily, his chest heaving up and down violently. It was obvious that he was extremely angry at this moment. No matter what, the blood of the Zhu family still flowed in his body, so he still had some courage. When the Great Ming Dynasty was at its peak, Japan, modern-day Japan, was one of the Great Ming Dynasty's vassal states, and also one of the non-conquering states. When were they not obedient children in front of the Great Ming Dynasty? Only a few years had passed, so how could they have the courage to clamor? At this moment, Zhu Qiyu really wanted to lift the ban on the sea in anger. He believed that with the Great Ming Dynasty's national strength, they would be able to become one of the overlords of the sea again in a few years. At that time, Japan would always be under the attack of the Great Ming Dynasty. However, this thought was just a moment of anger, and he quickly calmed his anger. It was not because of anything else, but because the new army had just been established, the firearms battalion had been rebuilt, and new firearms were also being developed. All of these required a lot of manpower and material resources. As a result, he did not have the ability to do other things. Chapter 269. Your Majesty, please calm down. In my humble opinion, since this matter involves the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, let him handle it. Chief Steward Ji Ning, who was standing to the side, saw Zhu Qiyu's weakness under his anger. He quickly gave Zhu Qiyu a way out of the situation. When Hu Shao heard that the matter was to be handled by Yang Chendong, he immediately understood what Jining meant. He wanted to speak up to stop him, but Zhu Qiyu had already spoken. That's right. Since this matter involves the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, let him handle it first. Zhu Qiyu knew that this was a way out of the situation. He immediately took advantage of the situation and pushed the troublesome matter out of the way. Let Yang Qindong handle it. If he was weak, then his title as the god of war would become a joke. When it spread throughout the world, it would be a serious blow to his reputation. As the emperor, he could be happy and take the initiative. On the other hand, if he wanted to be tough, then the matter would be left to him. When the time came, as the emperor, he only needed to say that the national treasury was empty. At that time, Yang Qindong would be the one who was in a difficult position, not him. Zhu Qiyu was very adept at using the tactic of retreating in order to advance. While Jining praised the emperor's wisdom, he sneered in his heart. He wanted to see how Yang Qindong would solve this problem this time. When he had defeated Walla, he had relied on advanced firearms. But Japan was far away at sea. Without a large warship, what could he do? How could he create a storm with one turn of the hand? Jining was even prepared to immediately spread Kimura Yoshida's words and announce to the public that the emperor had given the authority to deal with this matter to Zhong Dangong. He wanted to use this opportunity to make things difficult for this Zhong Dangong who didn't put him in his eyes. If Yang Qindong did not handle it well and lost the support of the people, he would have countless ways and excuses to punish him. In this way, all of Yang Qindong's assets would be flooded into the national treasury. As the one who carried out the order, he would certainly benefit greatly from it. Under Jin Ying's suggestion and Zhu Qiyu's tacit approval, Kimura Yoshida's incident quickly began to spread. It didn't take long for the cause and effect of the incident to spread all over the streets. In the Yang Qindong's manor 15 li south of the city, Yang Qindong also saw the emperor's decree. There seemed to be a tacit understanding between them. Yang Qindong was not willing to see Zhu Qiyu, and Zhu Qiyu did not seem to want to see Yang Qindong either. If there was anything, the eunuchs would come and pass on the edict. Are you trying to make things difficult for me by leaving this matter to me? Looking at the golden imperial edict on the desk, Yang Qindong smiled faintly. In the study, Junko had already dressed up and was standing beside Yang Qindong. When she came back last night, she caught a cold. Later, she fell asleep in Yang Qindong's warm embrace. When she opened her eyes again, she found that she was still in Yang Qindong's arms. With a red face, Junko struggled to get up, and then thanked Yang Qindong. Seeing that you caught a cold and hid in my arms, I didn't call you. Come, here is a bowl of ginger soup. It's still hot, drink it to get rid of the cold. Yang Qindong saw Junko struggling to get up, laughed, and reached out to hug her again. Then a bowl of hot ginger soup was delivered to Junko's mouth. From childhood to adulthood, although it could be said that Junko was used to having her clothes stretched out and food served, she was still not used to being served like this by a big man. But considering that this was Dong Shuai's kindness, she couldn't refuse. So, she reached out and drank the whole bowl of ginger soup. After doing this, Junko remembered that she had just woken up, so her makeup must be messy. So, she quickly went out to clean up. When she came back, before she could say a few words to Yang Qindong, Zhu Qiyu's imperial decree arrived. Junko was a very smart girl. The moment she saw the imperial decree, she thought of a lot of things. When she thought of the things she had heard before, she said with a surprised face, "Your great Ming emperor is so powerful. He clearly wants to push the trouble to you. Don't say that about our emperor." Yang Qindong smiled and reached out to touch Junko's nose, and then said, "How can I not know what the emperor means? If he didn't do this, I would have intervened. Is it because of me?" Junko looked at Yang Qindong curiously. Taking the initiative to attract trouble, she really couldn't think of why the smart Dong Shuai would make such a choice. If there must be a reason, then it was probably because of her. After all, Kimura Yoshida wanted her, didn't he? Yes and no. Yang Qindong gave an ambiguous answer. Few people who were born in China in the future had a good impression of Japan. Most of them even had a trace of resentment in their hearts, so they were called angry youths. Unfortunately, Yang Dong in his previous life was one of them. In this life, he became Yang Chendong, but this kind of thinking didn't change at all. Yang Chendong had both love and hate for this island country. What he hated was what they had done to China, and what he loved was their positive spirit. Perhaps because of the geographical location, they clearly knew that it was not easy to live. If they wanted to live a better life, they could only obtain resources through external expansion. The environment limited their thinking, so they had to do something to the nearby China. This was something that even Yang Chendong couldn't change. And if he didn't want to see the scene of killing each other, perhaps there was a good way, that was, assimilation, or a more vulgar way, annexation. As long as he annexed Japan and took it as his own, then his own people wouldn't fight with each other. In order to achieve this goal, Kimura Yoshida had to pass this hurdle, and if he used it well, he could have a legitimate reason and excuse to take the initiative to attack. This was the fundamental idea of Yang Chendong to intervene in this matter. But Junko must have thought that it was because of her, so Yang Chendong didn't need to explain anything. He gave a yes and no, but in Junko's ears, it made her very grateful. She naturally didn't know the ambition of the man in front of her. She simply thought that he was looking for trouble to protect her. At this moment, her love for Yang Chendong in her heart increased. A man who could take on such a big thing for her, even risking his life to save her, such a man was worthy of her life. Come, arrange something, I want to see Kimura Yoshida. Yang Chendong's voice sounded in the study, and soon the voice of Tiger's mane came from outside. Young master, we will arrange it. The news that Kimura Yoshida, an envoy of Japan, threatened to invade the Great Ming Dynasty spread like a whirlwind through the streets of the capital. For a time, everyone was talking about this matter. In the streets and alleys, there were always people in twos and threes talking about it. Perhaps because Japan was one of the vassal states of the Great Ming Dynasty, and because the capital was not near the sea, the people here didn't feel the trouble of Japan invading the sea, and there was no worry on their faces. They thought that it was nothing more than a small country that needed to be taught a lesson. How dare it provoke the Great Ming Dynasty? Because they were ignorant, they were fearless. Ordinary people knew too little about the outside world. What they knew was limited, so they were fearless. However, for some scholars and businessmen who had traveled far and wide, because they had seen and heard a lot, they would not be so relaxed. The Soaring Heaven restaurant had once been a rather famous restaurant in the capital. A group of noble scions had gathered here, and their sources of information were much wider than those of the common folk. It was precisely because of this that the discussion on this issue was particularly intense. In the hall, a tall and fat young man was expressing his opinion at this moment. Around him, there were about a dozen young masters or young master in brocade robes. Just from their clothes, one could tell that these people were either rich or noble. Speaking of me, Japan has always been paying tribute to the Ming Dynasty and is one of the tributary states to the Great Ming Dynasty. How dare they threaten the Great Ming Dynasty? In the end, it's because someone stepped on their tail. As the saying goes, even a rabbit bites when cornered, let alone a sea country. This person's voice was clear and precise, and after he finished speaking, the crowd began to cheer. Brother Bai's words are extremely correct. Then based on your words, as long as we don't push them too hard, Japan won't negotiate with us with such an attitude? There was no lack of flatterers in the crowd. On the surface, they were asking for advice, but in reality, they were praising. It can't be said to be completely correct. It's just the words of one side. Reality should be as such. As long as we can satisfy their demands and conditions, I presume that the situation can take a turn for the better at any time. The man called Brother Bai chuckled, his face flushed red with pride and excitement. Very good. You said it yourself that it's just the words of one side, and in reality, it really isn't entirely correct. A voice suddenly rang out, resounding through the main hall of the immortal abode. This voice caused the smug Brother Bai's expression to turn extremely unsightly. Looking at the source of the voice, one could see a handsome young master in a white robe. When he saw who had spoken, Brother Bai's expression became even more gloomy. Wang Si, what do you mean by this? The person who had spoken was a student of the Yang Clan Academy, Wang Si. He was also the grandson of the current Minister of Appointments, Wang Ji. Studying in the Yang Clan Academy wasn't all about studying hard every day. There were days off. In Yang Chendong's words, this was called striking a balance between work and rest. At the same time, he also encouraged his students to delve deeper into life, into the midst of the common people, to experience the various facets of life and understand the needs of the common people. Chapter 270. It was precisely because of this that Wang Si didn't choose to eat at the immortal abode. Instead, he went to the Flying Sky restaurant, which was much lower in quality. He wanted to experience a different environment, and different people gave him different feelings. However, he didn't expect to hear Yu Yuanbi's boisterous speech here. When he heard something that angered him, he couldn't help but retort. According to Yu Yuanbi, someone had stepped on Japan's tail. Needless to say, that person was Yang Chendong. It was because Yang Chendong had taken in Junko that Kimura Yoshida was angered. This was something that many people knew. Since someone dared to publicly criticize his teacher, how could Wang Si just stand by and do nothing? Although he was a bit older than Yang Chendong, the sixth young master of the Yang Clan's academy had already conquered everyone's hearts with his calmness and knowledge that exceeded his age. As a result, the students all considered themselves students. How could a student allow others to slander their teacher? What's more, Yu Yuanbi had a grudge against Yang Chendong. Yu Yuanbi was Yu Xiong's elder brother, and also the grandson of the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. However, he was much stronger than Yu Xiong, who had failed to live up to expectations and been executed. He was already in charge of the Ministry of Justice in his 20s, and was a major 6th-rank official. His grandfather, Yu Shiyue, had contributed greatly to this. However, Yu Yuanbi himself had also lived up to expectations. His performance was outstanding. They were both descendants of influential figures, and both were young masters. Their ideals were different, and their opinions were different. As soon as they met, the smell of gunpowder would naturally fill the air. Now, Yu Yuanbi was criticizing his teacher. It would be strange if Wang Si could just swallow this anger. When Yu Yuanbi saw Wang Si's accusation, his face became very ugly at first, but soon returned to normal. He walked over with a smile and said, "I was wondering who it was. It turns out to be our editor Wang Si." Wang Si's previous position was Hanlin Academy editor, a 7th-level official position. "Oh, by the way, I heard that you have quit long ago. Now you are a student. Huh, you are really promising. If I remember correctly, you are only 1 year younger than me. Why are you getting worse and worse as you live? Why are you still so young?" Yu Yuanbi's sarcastic words fell into Wang Si's ears. His expression didn't change. After studying in the Yang Clan's academy for several months, he had learned 70% of how to maintain one's temper. He knew when to get angry, and when to do so would only make his opponent angry. Therefore, he didn't pay attention to Yu Yuanbi's words. Instead, he corrected the topic and said, "Yu Yuanbi, this young master said that your analysis is wrong. Please don't change the topic." Seeing that Wang Si didn't fall for his trick and still didn't let go of his previous words, Yu Yuanbi's face darkened and said, "What? My mouth is on this young master's body. Do I need your permission to speak? As for you, you're no longer an official. Why don't you kneel when you see this young master? Yu Yuanbi, don't be so smug. This young master is also a self-admitted scholar. According to the laws of the Great Ming Dynasty, I don't need to kneel when I see an official. Who do you think you are? How dare you ask me to kneel?" Wang Si's expression was normal. He wouldn't be frightened by Yu Yuanbi's words. His grandfather was the current minister of the Ministry of Personnel. He was in charge of the affairs of the officials. What kind of officials hadn't he seen before? A minor major 6th-rank official couldn't scare him. Yu Yuanbi, who was refuted by Wang Si, had an ugly expression on his face. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that the young masters who followed him were looking at him as if he was a joke. He felt that they were right. He was just like a clown. Yunbi, who cared a lot about his face, felt that if he didn't do something, he would be seen through in the future. He thought about how his grandfather was the minister of the Ministry of Justice. A while ago, his third brother, Yu, was executed for causing trouble. This made him extremely angry. If he lost face here today, who knew how angry his grandfather would be when he found out? Yunbi suddenly became angry. He was still taller than Wang Si. He clenched his fists and approached him step by step. Wang Si, we've always minded our own business. Get out of here right now, and I'll pretend that you were never here. Impossible. Unless you admit your mistake and apologize to the Duke of Loyalty, I won't leave. I'll even announce your matter to the world and let everyone judge what you said wrong. Wang Si noticed Yunbi's angry expression, but he wasn't afraid at all. He didn't waste his time in the Yang Family Academy. He ran and trained his body every day, so he had a stronger physique than the average young master. He wasn't afraid of Yunbi, who was also a young master. Admit your mistake. Wang Si, I realized that after not seeing you for a few months, you haven't grown in other aspects, but your smarts have improved. Alright, then I'll show you which one is bigger, an apology or a fist. Yunbi attacked as he spoke. He swung his right fist at Wang Si. Although the students of the academy didn't have high-intensity training like Ling Feng, their bodies were stronger than ordinary people. Wang Si could have jumped to avoid this punch that wasn't very fast and didn't have much strength behind it. However, he didn't do so. On the contrary, he stood there motionless as if he was scared silly. He allowed the fist to land on his chest with a bang. After the punch landed, Wang Si's body trembled involuntarily and he took half a step back. Yunbi actually took the initiative to attack first. This scene shocked the other young masters and young master who were watching the show. They didn't have the background of these two people. Whether it was the minister of the Ministry of Appointments or the minister of the Ministry of Justice, they weren't people they could offend. For a moment, they stood there, not knowing what to do. They didn't dare to pull him back or reach out to help. Wang Si took half a step back from the punch, but there was no sign of pain on his face. On the contrary, he said calmly, everyone saw it. He was the one who made the first move. Since that's the case, don't blame me for being impolite. After he finished speaking, Wang Si, who had just taken half a step back, suddenly took half a step forward. Using the momentum of this half step, he stretched out his right arm and his entire right shoulder at the same time. Wang Si rotated his waist slightly. According to his usual training, Wang Si injected all the strength in his body into his right shoulder. Then, he punched out and hit Yunbi's body that hadn't retreated in time. One used brute force, while the other used skill and the strength of his entire body. Both punched out, but it was obvious who had the upper hand. With just one punch, Yunbi couldn't help but stagger and fall back as if he had lost his balance. Wang Si, who didn't show mercy, was excited when he saw that his punch was effective. He flew up and followed up, throwing out 2 more punches. One of the punches hit Yunbi's nose. Immediately, the sound of bone breaking rang out, followed by blood flowing out. This punch hurt Yunbi so much that tears flowed out. When he reached out and touched his nose and felt blood, his expression changed drastically. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Ah! Murder, murder!" He was no match for Wang Si at all. After taking 3 punches in a row, Yunbi could only keep running away. As he ran, he shouted at the young master and young masters who were watching the show, "Are you just going to watch like this? If I'm beaten to death here, all of you will be sued. Don't you know that?" Only then did everyone's attention return to the present with this shout. At that moment, everyone's expression changed drastically. They began to surround Wang Si. From the looks of it, they clearly wanted to stop him and make him stop. But how could Wang Si, who was in the mood to fight, stop so easily? After a few punches, he found that the simple fighting skills he learned in the Yang Academy were so effective. Wang Si wouldn't be polite. He sighed in his heart that he was so powerful. Seeing that others wanted to stop him, he immediately threw out a punch at them without caring about anything else. These people wanted to stop him. It was clear that they were in cahoots with Yu Yuanbi. It was not a pity to beat such people. Thump. After a few more punches, 2 of the young masters who came to stop the fight fell down. The others saw that Wang Si was crazy. They were afraid that he would kill someone, so they didn't care about others and rushed up. In an instant, they surrounded Wang Si tightly. Then, they hugged his legs, grabbed his hands, and held his waist. Wang Si, who was like a tiger who couldn't resist a pack of wolves, was quickly restrained. Yu Yuanbi, who had run to the entrance of the Fei Tian restaurant, saw that Wang Si was restrained and breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, he happened to see the soldiers of the warden's office patrolling on the street. He immediately shouted, "Help, someone is killing here." In the courtyard of the Japanese diplomatic mission in the capital. Yang Qindong appeared here under the protection of a group of guards wearing the signature camouflage uniform. Kimura Yoshida had been notified a long time ago. He also wanted to meet the Duke of Loyalty of the Great Ming Dynasty who defeated the Walla's army and protected Junko. At the same time, he also made the previous ambassador, Aoda Yuki, stay in the prison of the Great Ming Dynasty, so he waited here for a long time. When the courtyard door opened, Kimura Yoshida didn't go out to greet Yang Qindong. He wanted to show Yang Qindong his power and let him know that he wasn't someone to be trifled with. That way, he could take more initiative in the following conversation. The courtyard door opened, but he didn't see Kimura Yoshida coming out to greet him. Yang Qindong, who was in the luxurious carriage, didn't get out. Instead, he said to Tiger's mane outside the carriage in a very cold voice, "They are so arrogant. I'm here, but they don't know how to come out to greet me. Since they are so rude, then I'll tear down the door. I'd like to see how long they can last." "Yes." Tiger's mane answered excitedly. Then he said to Ling Feng beside him, "Tear down the door. If they don't come out, then tear down the courtyard." Chapter 271. Ling Feng and his brothers were all young people, and they were not afraid of making a big deal out of it. Now that they had received orders from the 6th young master, how could they be courteous? Immediately, their eyes lit up as they took out their military knives and began to tear down the door. Very soon, the sound of clanking could be heard. In the courtyard, Kimura Yoshida was still sitting in the main hall. Beside him stood the leader of the guards, Ikigami, and a group of Japanese samurai. The purpose of this battle was to intimidate Yang Qindong. It was said that this loyal duke of the Great Ming Dynasty had just turned 20 years old. What kind of courage could such a young man have? As for defeating the Walla's army, it was the work of the mercenaries. This was a well-known fact. A person like him should have been scared to death when he saw such a battle. While Kimura Yoshida was still imagining what would happen to this young brave loyal guild member, a samurai suddenly rushed in with a gloomy face. "Not good, not good, they are tearing down the door." "What do you mean by tearing down the gate? Who are they?" Kimura Yoshida was stunned when he heard the news, but soon he understood what was going on. When he heard that the other party was tearing down the gate, his anger couldn't be stopped. The gate was equivalent to a person's face. If it was really torn down, it was no different from a slap in the face. He knew that this bold and loyal princess had a temper, but he didn't expect her to be so bad-tempered. She didn't even meet him, and she gave him such a big gift. Kimura Yoshida, who had fainted, didn't feel good. He sat there and didn't make any sound. Until Ikigami reminded him. "Kimura-kun, we can't let them tear down the gate. If that's the case, we will lose face." Yes, go and stop them. If it doesn't work, we can use force to stop them." Kimura Yoshida, who was reminded by Ikigami, quickly regained his senses and ordered Ikigami. After receiving the order, Ikigami immediately rushed to the gate of the courtyard with more than 10 samurai. At this time, at the gate, more than half of the gate had been torn down. There were also many people of the Great Ming Dynasty who were standing here to watch the show. Ever since Jining deliberately released the news, many people had gathered outside the Japanese diplomatic mission's compound. They wanted to see how their country's god of war would resolve this matter. Was he really going to lower his head, or was he going to be as domineering as before? Now, it seemed that he had made the right decision to come. Although the loyal duke was young, he was indeed hot-blooded. He tore down the door without saying a word. This was even more satisfying than watching a show. And during the process of removing the gate, who knows how many people were cheering? They were cheering for the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. They clapped their hands to express their satisfaction. What are you doing? Do you know where this is? How dare you cause trouble here? Arrest them all. Qi Shang finally appeared. When he saw that there was only a frame on the left of the door, his eyes burned with anger. With Qi Shang's shout, more than 10 warriors behind him rushed out, heading straight for the Lengfeng soldiers who were prying open the door with their bayonets. Take them down. Tiger's man had been paying attention to the movement at the door for a long time. When he saw that the Japanese warriors were about to make a move, it was exactly what he wanted. Without saying a word, he gave the order to Captain Xiao Vi, who was standing beside him. As the captain of the first guard by Yang Chendong's side, Xiao Vi had a calm personality and excellent skills. When he heard Tiger's man's order, there was no way he would be polite. He personally led 10 of his team members to meet the seemingly aggressive Japanese warriors. The guards and the Japanese warriors were not on the same level at all. To be able to enter the guards and be responsible for the safety of the 6th young master, which one of them was not the best of the best. They were just dealing with ordinary Japanese samurai. To put it in a slightly exaggerated way, even if they were to let the other party use only one hand, they could still easily win. As Xiao Vi led his brothers to make a move, the Japanese warriors who rushed out were quickly knocked down to the ground one by one. Their important joints were hit hard, making them fall to the ground and constantly wail. Not only the ordinary Japanese warriors, but even Qi Shang could not escape. The captain of the guards, who was taken care of by Xiao Vi, was punched in the throat by the captain of the guards. He felt that it was very difficult to swallow. Then he was punched in the face, and blood splashed out. When he was knocked down to the ground by a sweeping kick, he was completely passive and had no power to fight back. The Japanese warriors were knocked down to the ground, and the door frame was completely removed. When Yang Chendong's luxurious carriage could enter, the carriage drove into the courtyard unscrupulously. Behind them, the cheers of countless people of the Great Ming Dynasty could be heard. In the courtyard, Kimura Yoshida came out of the main hall and saw the luxurious carriage in front of him. Not seeing Qi Shang and his warriors, Kimura Yoshida's face became very ugly, but he was stubborn. In order to maintain the dignity of Japan, he still stood in place and shouted loudly, "Who are you? Why don't you salute me when you see me?" Pa! As soon as he finished speaking, he was met with a raised whip. The whip hit him right in the middle, and a bloody wound appeared on Kimura Yoshida's body. It was Beta Persei, who was driving the carriage. This whip was a lesson for Kimura Yoshida. What a joke! The 6th young master was in the carriage. How could he allow others to shout there? Ah! Murder, murder! Kimura Yoshida's painful and fierce cries came from the courtyard. It had to be said that cowards had the same virtue. Just like Yu Yuanbi, who was beaten before, he kept shouting when he was beaten, as if doing so could release his fear. You are the Japanese messenger, humph. You are really a disgrace to the Japanese. In the luxurious carriage, Yang Chendong's voice slowly came out. This voice was not very loud, but it sounded like thunder in Kimura Yoshida's ears. He remembered that this was not Japan, and he was not in his own courtyard. He was now a Japanese messenger, representing the face of Japan. At the thought of this, his expression changed again and again. What he did just now was really a disgrace to Japan. If this matter was spread back to Japan, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa would be the first to not spare him. As the representative of Japan's Bushido, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa hated timid and irresponsible people the most. As a trusted follower, he naturally knew what to do in the face of trouble. When he looked at the luxurious carriage in front of him, he couldn't help but stop. Then he tried his best to summon up his courage, raised his head, and said, "I am the envoy of Japan. You can't do this to me. Otherwise, it is contempt for Japan. I want to seriously protest." "What did we do to you?" Yang Chendong's energetic voice sounded from within the carriage when he heard the words that were clearly threatening in appearance but weak in heart. This was Japan. When facing the weak, they were condescending. In the face of the strong, they finally knew how to say the word of protest. Some people were like this. If they didn't feel pain, they wouldn't know how powerful you were, and they wouldn't know what fear was. After being asked by Yang Chendong, Kimura Yoshida looked surprised. Thinking that he had just been whipped in the scene of Ikigami and other samurai being beaten to the ground, he said, "You hurt the Japanese messenger and our samurai." "Nonsense. Do you think that I, the Duke, will not let my guards beat him up? Don't you know that we have a saying, a good dog doesn't block the way?" Yang Chendong's voice came out of the carriage again. Being called a dog, Kimura Yoshida's face was of course not good. However, the situation was beyond his control. If he spoke rudely now, he wouldn't be able to escape from being beaten. As the saying goes, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. He decided to endure. A gentleman's revenge is a dish best served cold. "That's enough, Mr. Zhongdan. Since you are here to negotiate, shouldn't you meet with me now? Of course, I want to see what you have to say." The curtain of the carriage was suddenly opened from the inside, and Yang Chendong appeared in front of Kimura Yoshida, dressed in a green robe. This was the first time the two had met. Kimura Yoshida had the common characteristics of Japan. He was very short and looked a little wretched. Compared to the tall and handsome Yang Chendong, in terms of appearance, the difference between the two was more than one grade. Not to mention, Kimura Yoshida was already a middle-aged man. In comparison, Yang Chendong was too young, even a little too young. Yang Chendong finally appeared. He jumped down from the carriage and landed in front of Kimura Yoshida. When he saw that the other party was still looking at him from head to toe, he showed a trace of displeasure and said, "What's wrong? Are you not going to salute me when you see me?" "Oh." Being stared at by Yang Chendong's murderous eyes and his powerful aura, Kimura Yoshida couldn't help but agree. Then, he said respectfully, "The Japanese envoy greets Mr. Zhongdan of the Great Ming Dynasty." "Raise your head," Yang Chendong said magnanimously, then flicked his sleeves and looked like a gentleman. And this scene was seen by the commoners who were watching from outside. The gate was opened, and the people could directly see what was happening in the courtyard from the street. When they saw the Japanese envoy hurriedly salute Dong Shuai when he saw him, they immediately felt happy. Some people even cheered directly. It was the cheers that woke Kimura Yoshida up. He instantly realized that he was the envoy, and now he represented Japan. How could he bow his head in front of Yang Chendong? Kimura Yoshida was angry that Yang Chendong had humiliated him. He immediately raised his head and looked at Yang Chendong with resentment. Chapter 272. However, at this time, Dong Shuai had already turned his head away. He glanced at the courtyard with interest as if nothing had happened just now. This made Kimura Yoshida have a feeling that he couldn't use his strength. However, he didn't think about why he would lower his head when Yang Chendong threatened him. This was because of his servile nature. When he was in Japan, there were too many powerful people who needed him to lower his head. This had become a habit. When Yang Chendong pressured him a little, his nature was exposed. Kimura Yoshida, who was dissatisfied, felt that he seemed to have fallen into a disadvantage from the beginning. At this moment, he decided to save some face. He wanted to threaten Yang Chendong enough in the following negotiations to let him know that Japan was now very strong enough to threaten the Ming Dynasty. Loyal Duke. Kimura Yoshida raised his head and walked forward. He was about to say something, but at this time, Yang Qindong's voice sounded before him. Mr. Kimura, what do you think of the capital of the Ming Dynasty? It's very good, very majestic, and very spectacular. There are also a lot of people. Kimura Yoshida didn't know how to get to the point. After hearing Yang Qindong's words, a thought came to his mind. First, he praised Yang Qindong. When he saw the loyal and just great Ming Dynasty nodding and smiling, he suddenly changed his tone and said, "It's just that although the Ming Dynasty had a large population and had vast lands and abundant resources, they lacked a trace of courage. Especially last year, an army of 500,000 was defeated by the Walla cavalry that only had a few tens of thousands." As he spoke, Kimura Yoshida shook his head as if he was lamenting for the Ming Dynasty. However, Yang Qindong knew that he was rubbing salt on the wound. He was also telling Yang Qindong that the Ming Dynasty's army's combat power was not good. If they really fought with the warriors of Japan, it was still unknown who would win and who would lose. Well, Mr. Kimura is right. The Ming Dynasty did lose the battle last year. To Kimura Yoshida's surprise, Yang Qindong actually admitted it calmly. This was the truth. Even if Yang Qindong didn't want to admit it, he couldn't. Instead of beating around the bush, he might as well admit it so that the other party wouldn't have an excuse to attack him. Therefore, Yang Qindong's tone changed after he finished speaking. However, that battle wasn't fought by the Daizong Emperor, but by Yingzong. It was because of the chief eunuch Wang Zhen's mistake in commanding that our great Ming Empire's army was defeated. Because of this matter, our emperor has already learned from the painful experience and is now recruiting new troops, establishing firearms and artillery battalions. The strength of the army is increasing day by day. I think Kimura-san should have heard of this. I believe that it won't be long before these elite troops can return to the battlefield. At that time, anyone who wants to spy on our great Ming Dynasty will become a ghost under the blade of the sword. Yang Qindong spoke unhurriedly, as if he was repeating an extremely ordinary matter. Kimura Yoshida curled his lips in disdain. Of course, he heard that the great Ming Empire was training new troops, but he wasn't optimistic about it. It was difficult for an army without enough training to play a role on the battlefield, especially for new recruits who had never been to the battlefield. They couldn't make people feel the slightest fear. Therefore, he was not afraid of what Yang Qindong said. On the contrary, such a demonstration would only have the opposite effect. It would only prove that the current great Ming Dynasty was extremely weak. Perhaps Japan could take this opportunity to enter and ask for benefits. Kimura Yoshida was still disdainfully pouting, but all of this changed because of Yang Qindong's next words. Soon, his face became heavy. By the way, there is one thing that I forgot to tell Kimura-san. Our great Ming Empire has already established a friendly relationship with the sea mercenaries. If Japan really wants to send troops, I'm afraid that they will have to go through them first. As soon as the matter of the mercenaries was mentioned, Kimura Yoshida finally stopped being arrogant and looked very serious. If it was a month ago, Kimura Yoshida didn't care about the mercenaries. However, on the sea route from Japan to the Great Ming Dynasty, he happened to encounter a group of mercenaries on the sea. They were dressed in pure white military uniforms, and they used powerful artillery to suppress and stop the ship he was on. Not only that, but they also took away all the valuable things on the ship. In the face of all this, Kimura Yoshida and his subordinates could only stare blankly at each other. After witnessing the power of the enemy's powerful cannons, which could create huge waves when they entered the sea, they were really scared. This kind of firearm should not be owned by human beings. They knew that if they really wanted to fight back, they would only have one result, and that was to die in the sea. They were in the sea. They were robbed on the way, and it was done by the mercenaries. How could Kimura Yoshida forget this kind of thing? Now that Yang Qindong reminded him that if he wanted to attack the great Ming Empire, he might have to become enemies with the mercenaries. The fear in his heart rose spontaneously. He didn't know why, but the only thing that flashed in his mind was the loud roar caused by the heavy artillery falling into the sea. Kimura Yoshida was stunned. Yang Qindong knew that his threat had worked. His arrangement of Lang Feng's robbery was even more effective. He was afraid that the opponent would be incomparably terrified. They should be well behaved for a period of time, and wouldn't grumble in front of others. While Yang Chendong was still thinking about how perfect his plan was, outside the courtyard, an inconspicuous woodcutter came to Yang Wu, who was standing guard outside the courtyard, and whispered something to him. Yang Wu's expression changed. He walked past the cold front and came to Yang Chendong's side. "Young master, there's a small problem." When Yang Wu told Yang Chendong the news he just received, Yang Chendong's expression darkened, but he quickly returned to normal. When he turned to look at Kimura Yoshida, he said coldly, "Your wish to see me has been fulfilled. I've also given you the warning you should give. If you still want to continue doing wrong, I'll accompany you at any time. Mr. Kimura, you should also take care of yourself. Don't cause trouble for the master behind you." It seemed like a kind reminder, but it also seemed like a threat. After Yang Chendong finished speaking, he turned around and returned to the carriage. Everyone immediately left, leaving Kimura Yoshida with a clear view of their backs. It wasn't until a long time after Yang Chendong left that Kimura Yoshida came back to his senses. Recalling everything that happened, he was surprised to find that from the beginning to the end, it seemed that the initiative was in the hands of the other party, and he had been passive. Even the choice of war was forced by the other party. What about the peace talk? What about the promise of getting Junko from him? It seemed that everything was over before he had the time to mention it. After Yang Chendong and his group left the Japanese embassy, they went straight to the Ministry of Justice. The news reported by Yang Wu was released by the Security Bureau. Wang Si and Yu Yuanbi fought and were caught by the people of the 5 cities' warden's office. They were sent to the Supreme Court. After a simple interrogation, they were transferred to the Ministry of Justice and finally sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison. In such a short time, so many things happened, and the efficiency of the case was so fast that it was shocking. It would be strange if things were simple. Whether it was Wang Si or Yu Yuanbi, they both had the backing of a minister. But even so, they were sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison. It was obvious that someone wanted to take the opportunity to make trouble. He could even guess the person behind the scenes. It seems that the death of a grandson can't make some people stop. Do they have to force me to eradicate them all? Yang Chendong thought angrily. Some people didn't know what was good for them. Outside the carriage, Tiger's Mane's voice suddenly sounded. "Young master, Yang San is here. Let him in the carriage." Hearing that even the deputy director came in person, Yang Chendong felt a little relieved. Now that he could get first-hand information, he had more options to deal with the next situation. The horse carriage did not stop. Yang San only lightly jumped, and entered the horse carriage. "Greetings, young master. No need to be so polite. Tell me what you know." Yang Chendong waved his hand casually. Yang San nodded and said, "Young master, the situation is like this. In Fei Tian restaurant, Yu Yuanbi said something unfavorable to the young master. He insinuated that the Japanese diplomatic mission was caused by the young master. Wang Si happened to hear this, and the two sides got into a quarrel. Yu Yuanbi took advantage of the fact that there were many of them and he was tall and strong, so he attacked first. Wang Si fought back in self-defense and beat Yu Yuanbi. But in the end, because he was outnumbered, he suffered a small loss. After that, the patrolling soldiers of the warden's office of the 5 cities happened to pass by. They took everyone away and sent them to the Supreme Court. After knowing their identities, the Supreme Court transferred the case to the Ministry of Justice. After Li Wenxiao judged the case, Wang Si was sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison. Yu Yuanbi was sent to the Ministry of Justice's hospital for treatment because his injuries were too serious. This is Li Wenxiao's situation. As Yang San spoke, he passed a document to Yang Chendong. It recorded the basic information of Li Wenxiao, the official of the Ministry of Justice. It included his birth, his promotion history, his background information, and some of the mistakes he made. Since the incident with Yu Xiong, the Security Bureau had paid special attention to some of the officials in the Ministry of Justice, especially those close to Yushuriwe. Li Wenxiao was included in their sights. As an official, not only did he need to have knowledge, insight, and courage, he also needed someone to promote him and nurture him. With a good benefactor, anything an official did would be twice the result with half the effort. Therefore, Yang Chendong had long requested the Security Bureau to do their best to gather all the information they could about the officials they could get access to. Especially the background, it was absolutely not to be underestimated. Chapter 273. The information was placed in front of Yang Chendong, but before he could flip through it, Yang San continued, Su Yozhen also sent a message, asking if we need him to take action. Su Yozhen was no longer a 6th grade official like last year, but a 3rd grade official. With the support and control of Yang Chendong, he was on the rise. Now that he was the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, he could naturally intervene in this matter. Him? Yang Chendong first glanced at Yang San with a puzzled expression. Following which, a plan began to rapidly form in his mind. He is really thoughtful. Since this is the case, I believe that he will need some things to establish himself after entering the Ministry of Justice. In that case, I will lend him a hand. How about this, you personally pass on a message to him and ask him to do this. Half an hour later, the entrance of the Ministry of Justice was filled with brave soldiers at this moment. The soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty who were responsible for the security of this place were nervously holding the spears or sabers in their hands, looking at the large luxurious carriage parked in front of them with vigilance. Such a large carriage with such specifications could be counted on one's fingers in the entire capital, but this was the only carriage with black rubber wheels. It had almost become a symbol of Yang Chendong. No matter where he appeared, it was difficult not to attract attention. When Yang Chendong appeared here, he was naturally recognized at the first moment. But it was precisely because of this that the soldiers in charge of the security of the government were particularly nervous. Anyone who was well informed knew that this luxurious carriage belonged to the East Marshal and the army god. When facing the Walla army, it was the army god who defeated them with his own strength. Not only did he kill the 2 younger brothers of the Walla leader, Yes Hen, but he also made them suffer heavy losses. At the same time, he also saved more than 70,000 soldiers. Even now, there were still many newly recruited soldiers who were among the 70,000 soldiers. In the entire capital, countless people had set up a longevity tablet for the army god. When such a person came to the Ministry of Justice, how could these ordinary soldiers resist him? The soldiers guarding outside the door did not know why Yang Chendong came. The only thing they could do was to keep an eye on the carriage and send someone to inform the officials in the yamen. Fortunately, the carriage didn't seem to have any intention of moving forward after reaching this point. The war god didn't make things difficult for them, and all the soldiers breathed a sigh of relief. The atmosphere seemed to be slowly easing. All of this continued until an official walked out of the yamen. Judging from his official robes, he should be a 5th-rank official of the imperial court. As soon as this person appeared, he saw the luxurious carriage blocking the entrance of the yamen. His eyes were filled with anger and his hands involuntarily moved behind his back. He raised his head and puffed out his chest as he said, "Who are you? How could they block the entrance of the Ministry of Justice? Are you trying to rebel?" This accusation was not small at all. In ancient times, as long as it was related to rebellion, 9 generations of the family would be executed. This official said this in front of so many people. It was obvious that he wanted to put a huge accusation on Yang Chendong so that he would be careful with his words and actions. The only luxurious carriage in the capital was in front of them, but this official acted as if he didn't see it. Moreover, he immediately put a huge accusation on them. If he said that he came to solve the problem with good intentions, no one would believe him. As soon as the accusation of rebellion was mentioned, everyone's expression changed. Even Beta Persei, who was driving the carriage, had an unfriendly expression. He glared fiercely at the 5th-rank official in front of him. The other guards and Leng Feng who came with him also emitted a murderous aura. They looked as if they would tear this person into pieces at the slightest order. Ha ha ha. When the atmosphere reached its peak, laughter suddenly came from within the luxurious carriage. It was this laughter that made those Lang Feng members, who were unable to suppress their resentment, feel happy. Their murderous aura was invisible. Needless to say, the laughter naturally came from Yang Chendong. Accompanied by the laughter, the curtain of the carriage was lifted from the inside, revealing a handsome and young face. As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, he looked straight at the official from the Ministry of Justice and asked sternly, "This duke is here. You are just a little fifth-rank official. Don't you know that you should greet him with a salute?" Originally, when he saw Yang Chendong finally show his face, this fifth-rank official was about to stare at Yang Chendong with an eye for an eye. When he suddenly heard these words, he suddenly thought of something. Then his entire body trembled. Only then did he reluctantly cup his hands and salute. "The Ministry of Justice's director, Li Wenxiao, greets the Duke of Loyalty." Yang Chendong was not only the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, but he had also held the position of General of Agile Cavalry. That was a second-rank military official position. According to the laws of the Great Ming Dynasty, when a low-rank official saw a high-rank official, he had to salute. Yang Chendong's use of this to suppress people was very suitable. Li Wenxiao lowered his head, and the momentum that he had accumulated couldn't help but dissipate. When the other soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty saw that their high-rank official was like this, they also knelt on the ground and greeted loudly, "Greetings, Duke of Loyalty and Courage." Yang Chendong acted as if he didn't see these people greeting him, and he only looked at Li Wenxiao with interest. People said that enemies would always meet. They never expected that as soon as they arrived at the Ministry of Justice's Yamen, they would meet the main character. This was quite interesting. He looked Li Wenxiao up and down with a playful look in his eyes. However, it was this kind of gaze that made Li Wenxiao feel uncomfortable. He didn't know why this bold Duke of Loyalty and Courage was staring at him like this. Could it be that there was something wrong with his clothes? Li Wenxiao couldn't help but look around and size himself up. He didn't find anything wrong. When he raised his head, he saw that Yang Chendong's gaze had a few more traces of coldness. It was a cold light. This kind of gaze was full of killing intent. After just a glance, Li Wenxiao didn't know why, but he actually felt his whole body turn cold. Although the weather had begun to warm up, he still felt his whole body tremble at this time. Li Wenxiao, who was frightened by this kind of gaze, wanted to turn around and leave. However, he knew that if he backed down now, then everything he had done before would be in vain. In order to win the high-rank official's satisfaction, he could only endure. As long as he blocked Yang Chendong's anger, he would be able to truly enter the eyes of some officials. In order to encourage himself and to increase his courage, Li Wenxiao raised his head again and said, "Duke of Loyalty and Courage? I don't know why you didn't stay in the Yang family village, but instead came to the Ministry of Justice's Yamen. Do you know that this is an office? Your appearance has already affected the Ministry of Justice's official operations. If something happens because of this, can you bear the responsibility?" Li Wenxiao's words had a strong sense of righteousness, and the excuse he found was also appropriate. Just as he was feeling satisfied with his words, Yang Chendong had already replied, "Since you came to the Yamen, of course you came to complain. Don't tell me you came here to eat? Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha." Yang Chendong's laughter immediately attracted a round of laughter from the accompanying Lang Feng. This laughter made Li Wenxiao's words seem like a joke. Immediately, he was so embarrassed that his face was filled with anger. This was clearly a feeling of being looked down upon. Just as he was about to shout and treat it seriously, there was a sudden sound of footsteps behind him. Then, he heard someone say, "Left Assistant Minister Su Yozhen has arrived." When the voice sounded, Li Wenxiao's body shook. He hurriedly turned around and saw that one of the Shangguan officials, Su Yozhen, had appeared. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Li Wenxiao greets Lord Su." "Well, you did well." As soon as Su Yozhen appeared, she gave Li Wenxiao a verbal compliment. This sentence made Li Wenxiao, who was originally furious, feel very comfortable. With the Shangguan official supporting his actions, he wanted to see what this Duke of Loyalty could do to him next. Su Yozhen nodded at Li Wenxiao with an expression of praise. At this moment, he also noticed Yang Qindong standing at the entrance. He immediately cupped his hands and bowed, "So it is the Duke of Loyalty. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you. But what is the Duke of Loyalty doing here? Moreover, he had so many servants with him. Could it be that you are dissatisfied with the Ministry of Justice?" First, the greeting was followed by the questioning. Su Yozhen did things swiftly and decisively. He had the demeanor of a great master. When these words came out, the originally frightened soldiers felt very refreshed. The originally low morale seemed to have recovered by quite a bit. However, when Yang Qindong saw Su Yozhen appear, he was neither happy nor angry. No one could tell what he was thinking. He only looked coldly at Su Yozhen, as if he was pressuring him. However, Su Yozhen was a third-rank official of the imperial court. His wisdom and courage were far from what Li Wenxiao, a fifth-rank official, could compare to. Facing this kind of gaze, he was not afraid at all. He still looked at him with a calm expression. The two people's gazes looked at each other in the air for a full 10 seconds. When no one was able to gain the upper hand, Yang Qindong said, "Since I came to your Ministry of Justice, of course I have to do a case. I have a complaint here against an official. Please accept it, Lord Su." With a wave of his hand, a complaint appeared in his right hand. He handed it to Tiger's Mane, who was waiting on the side. Then, he handed it to Su Yozhen. She reached out her hand and took the complaint paper. After casually glancing at it, Su Yozhen's expression changed. Then, he inadvertently glanced at Li Wenxiao. Then, he lightly nodded and said, "This official will accept the Duke of Loyalty's complaint. The Ministry of Justice will also enforce the law. We will definitely give the Duke of Loyalty a satisfactory explanation." "Very good. I hope Lord Su can do as you say. Of course, if you wish to show favoritism, I don't mind submitting a memorial to the Emperor. At that time, it won't just be the defendant who is being investigated. Your Ministry of Justice will also be implicated. Ha ha ha, let's go." After Yang Qindong finished speaking, he turned around and left without a trace of reluctance. However, it seemed that he was blocked by Su Yozhen. Chapter 274. After Yang Qindong left, everyone looked at Su Yozhen in a completely different light. In the face of a military god, in the face of a duke, this Lord Su actually dared to use his own body to block the attack. Most importantly, he succeeded. If this matter were to spread, his reputation would probably be ruined. On the other hand, Su Yozhen did not appear to be complacent. Instead, he held the letter of complaint in his hand and directly said to his personal attendant, "Prepare a sedan. Let's go to the Yu residence." The Yu residence was naturally the residence of the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. In less than an hour, Su Yozhen had already appeared in the main hall of Minister Yu's residence where he received guests. Yu Shiyue somewhat looked down on this subordinate of his. A year ago, this person was still a sixth-rank official. When he saw him, he had to bow from afar. However, in such a short period of time, he was only a step away from Yu Shiyue. This kind of leap in promotion made Yu Shiyue faintly worried. However, regardless of whether he wanted to see him or not, since he was here, he still had to invite him into the residence. Otherwise, if word got out, everyone would say that he was immature and did something wrong. In the main hall, Yu Shiyue sat down. After the servants served tea, Yu Shiyue said with a straight face, "Lord Su, may I know the reason for your visit? If you want to talk about Bai Er's case, then forget it. As his relative, this official needs to avoid suspicion." Seeing Yu Shiyue so serious and saying that he would not care about the fight between Yu Yunbi and Wang Si, a trace of mockery flashed in his heart. If he really did not care, why would Li Wenxiao stand up for him? Why would Yu Yunbi lie in the medical hall and Wang Si be imprisoned in the Ministry of Justice's prison? He did not say anything in his heart. However, he didn't say anything. Some things were just like that. Everyone knew what was going on, but what they said wasn't what they thought. This was also one of the ways of being an official. Lord Yu, I'm not here because of the children's fight. Someone has filed a lawsuit against Li Wenxiao, an official of the Ministry of Justice. They say that he took bribes from the defendant and made several false and unjust cases. This is the complaint. Please have a look, Lord Yu. With a very respectful expression, Su Yozhen handed the complaint paper from Yang Chendong to Yu Shiyue. She had thought that Su Yozhen was here to talk about her grandson's case. Although this case was not big and the details of the case were not serious, it still involved two ministers. It could be said that it was very important. It was reasonable for Su Yozhen to come here and say something bad about him. After all, everyone had the desire to improve themselves. However, when Yu Shiyue heard that Li Wenxiao was involved in the case, her face turned serious. Just 4 hours ago, Li Wenxiao sent a trusted aide to report that Yu Yuanbi had been arranged to rest in the medical office by him. Wang Si had been thrown into prison and needed to be cleaned up. Yu Shiyue had a good impression of Li Wenxiao's actions. He thought that Li Wenxiao was worthy of being promoted by him. His performance was really good. If there was a chance in the future, he would consider giving him more responsibilities, promotion. However, he did not expect that someone would file a lawsuit against him so quickly. He would never believe that it had nothing to do with his grandson's case. Who sent the complaint paper? Yu Shiyue, who was angry, suppressed his anger and asked. Yang Chendong, the Duke of Loyalty, Su Yozhen, who knew that he would ask this question, answered softly. It's him. When he heard that it was Yang Chendong who personally handed the complaint paper, his right eyelid could not help but twitch. If it was someone else, he might be able to find a way to deal with it and find a suitable way to turn the big problem into a small one. But if it was Yang Chendong, then it was obviously impossible to fool this matter easily. If he did this, not only would the matter not be solved, but it might also implicate him. Who? After exhaling a long breath, Yu Shiyue thought about the whole matter from beginning to end. Then, he thought of abandoning the rook to save the king. Following that, he said, forget it. Since it's a letter of complaint from the loyal duke, then we must investigate it thoroughly. Everything will be done according to the law. It is better to let Sir Su take over this matter. Yes, I accept the order. Su Yozhen wanted this result. No matter what, Li Wenxiao was also a person promoted by Yu Shiyue. If he started the investigation without even a greeting, it would seem a bit aggressive. If some of his colleagues found out, they would think that he was threatening his superior. However, with this trip and Minister Yu's permission, all of this was within his expectations. After all, anyone would be willing to sacrifice themselves for Li Wenxiao, a fifth-ranked martial artist. And with Yu Shiyue's reply, no one would be able to say anything about it. After finishing the business, Su Yozhen got up and said goodbye. He quickly left Yu Manor. As soon as he left, Yu Shiyue summoned his trusted aide and whispered, make arrangements for Li Wen's family. Tell them not to worry no matter what happens. This official will ensure the safety of their parents and ensure their future. Tell them not to speak or act recklessly. Yu Shiyue was so worried because when Li Wenxiao was promoted, he had received a lot of gifts from him. As the saying goes, one's hands are soft when one receives gifts. That was why he promoted him to be of use. The facts also proved that this person was very good at handling matters. He could rest assured that some things would be handed over to him. But what he did not expect was that something would happen now. Since this was the case, he naturally had to comfort his family properly. At the same time, he had to protect this Li Wenxiao. Even if he could not let him become an official, he had to ensure the quality of life of his family. In this way, not only would he prove to outsiders that he would not forget his roots, but he could also set an example for more people to be willing to work for him and be loyal to him. Even now, Yu Shiyue still believed that the consequences of this matter were not serious. At most, he would lose a good general and just have to give out some money. But he did not know that Li Wenxiao's matter would be the fuse that would lead to his downfall. It was truly a case of everyone kicking a man who was down. In the depths of the imperial palace, in the main hall where acting patriarch Zhu Qiyu worked. At this moment, he was listening to Chief Eunuch Jining report on two matters that had just occurred in the capital. It was worth mentioning that these two matters were closely related to the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, Yang Chendong. The first matter naturally referred to Yang Chendong's meeting with the Japanese envoy, Kimura Yoshida. Tearing down the gate of the diplomatic mission, forcing his way in, and whipping the envoy was something that had never happened in history. But Yang Chendong had done it, and it had to be said that he was extremely daring. Even Zhu Qiyu was shocked when he heard about it. He wondered if this Duke of Loyalty and Courage was not afraid that the Japanese would fly into a rage out of humiliation and invade the Great Ming Sea. But no matter what he thought, Zhu Qiyu had no intention of interfering. This was because the outcome of this matter seemed to be beneficial to him. If Yang Chendong's actions had frightened the Japanese emissaries and made them give up, then he would also have some peace and quiet. Others would also say that he had used the right people to do so. On the other hand, if Yang Chendong's audacity provoked the Japanese emissary and caused Japan to take actual action and start to violate the borders, then all the blame could be placed on Yang Chendong alone. This would greatly damage his reputation, and at the same time, it would be the best excuse to deal with him. Presumably, at that time, it might be time to deal with the threat. Zhu Qiyu was happy to see such a thing happen. She wouldn't be criticized and attacked by others. She could also gather power in her own hands. On the contrary, he hoped that this Duke of Loyalty and Courage would be happy, because the more things he did, the more he would expose himself, and any mistake could become one of the ways to attack him. As the influence of the Yang family bank grew, more and more people saved money. At this moment, Zhu Qiyu was jealous. If it were not for the fact that the new army was still being recruited and trained, the matter of Zhu Qizhen in the south had not been resolved, and the situation in Walla in the north had not been completely settled, he would have already made dealing with Yang Chendong his top priority. Regarding the first matter, Zhu Qiyu didn't express any opinion. She simply watched as it developed. The second matter, Yang Chendong's submission of the complaint to the Ministry of Justice, made Zhu Qiyu have to say something. Although this Yang Chendong is young, he is not reckless. We thought that he would take credit for his contributions and force his way into the Ministry of Justice's yamen. If that's the case, then we cannot let this matter escalate. We will have to ask him for an explanation. Yes, Your Majesty is right. This Duke of Loyalty and Courage does things with some propriety. But the left assistant minister Su Yozhen was able to withstand his attack head-on and did not yield a single step. Moreover, he even made a trip to the Yu mansion to ask for Shengguan's advice. He is also a smart person, a capable official. Borrowing the emperor's words, Jining conveniently picked up some private goods and sent them over. Recently, Su Yozhen had given Jining a lot of benefits. He had given her banknotes and treasures. Jining had been served very well. After receiving so many benefits from others, Jining had to put in a few good words for them at the crucial moment to give the emperor extra credit. This was what Jining needed to do. As expected, once these words were said, Zhu Qiyu nodded repeatedly and said, "Beloved official Su is indeed a talent. Most importantly, he has many grievances with the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. You can rest assured using this kind of person. How about this, you go back and observe him carefully. If he is reliable, let him do his job well. We will not treat him unfairly in the future." Su Yozhen had once caused trouble for Yang Chendong when Zhu Qizhen was still in power. First, he had impeached him, then he had recommended him. Everything he had done could be made public and no one could say anything about it. Even Yang Chendong did not seem to be able to retaliate against these methods. An official like this, who did not fear powerful officials and had his own methods, of course Zhu Qiyu would like him. At least he knew that this person's existence could somewhat curb Yang Chendong's forceful momentum. This was enough for him to be of great use. Chapter 275. Originally, she had only wanted to help Su Yozhen put in a few good words to strengthen her position in the emperor's heart. She had not expected to receive such a promise. Jining was overjoyed. With this news, getting a few 100,000 taels of silver from Su Yozhen shouldn't be a problem. Delighted, Jining respectfully replied, "This subject will pass on your Majesty's words to Lord Su. I'm sure that he will shed tears of gratitude and will wholeheartedly work for your Majesty in the future." "Huh, good, good." Zhu Qiyu also laughed heartily. But in his heart, he was somewhat looking forward to the next two things. He wanted to see what would happen when the two grandsons of the minister fought. He wanted to see what the Japanese would do. He also wanted to see what kind of wonderful performance Su Yozhen would have. The Wang residence. As the current Minister of Personnel, he was in charge of the promotion and evaluation of officials. Wang Ji's residence had a majestic aura. But at this moment, in his study, Minister Wang's expression was rather unsightly. This was especially so when an official came to report that his most favored grandson, Wang Si, was currently suffering from hunger and cold in a dungeon. He was so angry that his beard trembled. As the Minister of Personnel for many years, he had personally promoted countless officials. If one were to say that it wasn't because of one's personal preference, no one would believe it even if one were to say it. It was precisely because of this that in the past few years, very few people in the capital had been able to escape his eyes and ears. There would always be some officials who would reveal information to him in the name of repaying a debt of gratitude, and this included people from all sorts of departments. Just as his grandson had started fighting with Yu Shiyue's grandson, the news had arrived. Wang Ji did not care at first when this matter came out. It was just a child's quarrel. They would each be given 50 strikes and sent back to their respective residences to manage. At the very least, if he were the one in charge, this would definitely be the case. After all, he was the Minister of Personnel, and Yu Shiyue was the Minister of Punishments. They were both officials of the court and would see each other frequently. It was impossible for them to fall out over the matter of a child. But reality did not develop as he had expected. From the reports of the officials, Yu Yuanbi had gone to the hospital in the name of recuperating and was very comfortable. His grandson was locked up in a cold and damp dungeon. How could Wang Ji not be angered by such an obvious way of dealing with the situation? However, due to his identity, it wasn't convenient for Wang Ji to interfere. He could only watch the performance of the officials from the Ministry of Justice from afar. Fortunately, Yang Chendong soon made a move, which made Minister Wang feel relieved. Wang Si didn't acknowledge the wrong teacher. Although this gentleman's actual age was younger than his grandson's, it was still true that the one who reached the top was the teacher. He had thought that since Yang Chendong had made a move, his grandson would be fine. However, the result was not like this. On the contrary, this loyal duke of the Great Ming Dynasty took a different approach and sent a complaint to the Ministry of Justice, Li Wenxiao, who had distorted the facts. At first, Wang Ji was puzzled by this outcome. However, after thinking about it carefully, he couldn't help but clap his hands in praise. This loyal duke was clearly going to use a ruthless method to cure Wang Si. Yes, with Yang Chendong's identity, he could naturally ask the Ministry of Justice for Wang Si. He could simply bail Wang Si out of the dungeon. However, if he did this, he would be at a disadvantage. Others would say that this was the result of suppressing people with power and couldn't truly convince the public. On the other hand, if he didn't mention Wang Si's matter and let him suffer a little, he would target the official in charge, Li Wenxiao. In this way, if he really overthrew Li Wenxiao, who would dare to deal with people and matters related to the loyal duke out of selfishness in the future? It was just letting his grandson suffer for a day or two more, but it would fundamentally prevent such things from happening. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. Even if Wang Si was his favorite grandson, Wang Ji still supported Yang Chendong's decision. Perhaps this was the difference in the structure. As the minister of a ministry, he didn't look at the small profits in front of him, but the long term. I just don't know if the Loyalty Duke's paper can overturn Li Wenxiao's case. No, I have to lend a helping hand. I also have to let others know that those who dare to bully my grandson, Wang Ji, should be prepared to be dealt with. Wang Ji muttered to himself. Then, he called out to the outside, men. In the Ministry of Justice's court. Although Li Wenxiao was still wearing his official robes, his face was pale. Even though the weather outside wasn't hot at all, and it was a bit cold in the morning and evening. Beads of sweat flowed down from his forehead, splattering on the ground. Li Wenxiao, there are people suing you for corruption, accepting bribes, and creating many unjust, false, and wrong cases. You have to give an explanation. Su Yozhen sat high up in the court. As she spoke, she casually threw the paper in front of Li Wenxiao. From the moment he was brought to this torture court, Li Wenxiao had a bad feeling. Especially when he found out that Assistant Minister Su had personally gone to Minister Yu Shiyue's residence and still made such a decision. He knew that he had been abandoned, and that the matter would be difficult to resolve. The paper had been personally sent by the Loyalty Duke, who was at the peak of his power. The lawsuit had also been approved by his superior, Minister of Justice Yu Shiyue. The person in charge of his trial was the second-in-command of the Ministry of Justice, Left Assistant Minister Su Yozhen. With such a weighty list before him, if he still held on to any hope, wouldn't he be deceiving himself and others? Wasn't this enough to wake him up and frighten him? When the paper floated in front of him and he looked at the details written on it, his sweat dripped down even faster. He had done many of these things very secretly. He didn't know why they were still dug up. However, after reading the complaint, he felt much more at ease. There was no other reason other than the fact that the things recorded on the paper were all recent, and the amount of corruption wasn't that huge. From the looks of it, it wasn't enough to smash him to death with a hammer. At most, he would be dismissed from his position. If things went well, he might even be able to keep his position as an official and rise again in the future. It was precisely because he saw these papers that Li Wenxiao was not as afraid as before. When he raised his head to look at the presiding judge, Su Yozhen, he actually had an honest expression as he said, "Lord Su, this official has indeed done some foolish things. After the incident, I deeply regret it. Please take into account this official's honest answers and cooperation, and forgive me." Oh. So you've admitted to it? Originally, Su Yozhen had been waiting to see Li Wenxiao cry out that he had been wronged. Then, he would show his swift and decisive side and let everyone see how the newly appointed left assistant minister dealt with the case and how ruthless his methods were. Of course, all of this was based on his trust in Yang Chendong. He knew that since this person had taken out these papers in front of everyone, he had to have enough evidence. But he never thought that Li Wenxiao would not only admit to everything, but also have such a positive attitude. This made him feel like he had punched cotton. A police officer's achievement was to find the culprit through clues. A judge's achievement was to use enough evidence to make the defendant admit to his crimes. However, if all the prisoners were to confess before he could do anything, then there would be no sense of accomplishment. At this moment, Su Yozhen felt this way. He had already seen the papers. If Li Wenxiao denied everything, then he could produce enough evidence to prove that he was right. He could also add a heavy punishment based on the other party's uncooperative behavior. On the other hand, if the other party admitted to everything and had a good attitude, then based on this, it would be much more difficult to do anything to him. If Yu Shiyue sincerely protected him, then it was possible that he would be able to keep his position as an official. At this moment, Su Yozhen was a little disappointed. He even had a trace of doubt about Yang Chendong's ability. If the dignified Duke of Loyalty wanted to deal with someone, he shouldn't only produce this little bit of evidence. If that was the case, then it would be difficult for him. But he didn't think about it. Yang Chendong's Security Bureau had only been established for a short period of time, and there were so many officials to keep an eye on. A fifth-rank official in the Ministry of Justice was not the most important thing. To be able to find out about this, he had already put in a lot of effort. It was not impossible to find out about the past, but to do it in a short period of time would be very difficult. But he still did it, which was somewhat thought-provoking. Could it be that he was sure that there would be others who would do it? Li Wenxiao's cooperative behavior made it difficult for Su Yozhen, but on the surface, he still nodded with praise. Very good, your attitude is very cooperative. This official will record all of this. As for how to deal with it in the end, I still need to discuss with a few officials before the final decision can be made. For now, leave. Before the word "hall" could be said, a small official from the Ministry of Justice came to Su Yozhen's side and whispered a few words in his ear. At the same time, he took out a stack of papers from his sleeve and placed it on the table. Then, he slowly retreated. Su Yozhen's gaze fell on the table in front of him and looked at the densely written papers. When he raised his head to look at Li Wenxiao, who was standing below the stage, he couldn't help but shake his head. Then, he said, "Come, strip him of his official robes." Li Wenxiao, who was originally waiting to leave, suddenly saw Su Yozhen's attitude change. At the same time, his heart was beating like a drum as he shouted, "Official Su, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why? Seeing that you and I are colleagues, you can see for yourself." Su Yozhen pushed his hand on the table, and the thick papers fluttered in the air. When they landed on Li Wenxiao's feet, he lowered his head and looked up. Then, he fell to the ground. Chapter 276. The contents of these papers were exactly what he had done a few years ago when he had just become an official. Perhaps it was because he had just entered the court, but his courage was still relatively big. He really dared to accept any kind of money and dared to do anything. Among them, he was even involved in 2 murder cases. At that time, it was precisely because he had accepted these bribes that he was able to give the money to his superiors and get promoted. He originally thought that after so many years, everyone would definitely not remember these things, but now they were all dug up. If he dared to admit it, not to mention his official position, it would be extremely difficult to keep his life. No. No. These things were not done by me. It has nothing to do with me. Seeing that he might die if he admitted it, Li Wenxiao of course would not let go. Li Wenxiao's expression finally changed, which also made Su Yozhen interested. These were all sent by the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, so there was no need to doubt the authenticity of these documents. In the face of ironclad evidence, Li Wenxiao still dared to deny it. It was finally time for Su Yozhen to show his skills. What? You don't want to admit it? Well then, we will interrogate you one by one. Come, prepare the torture equipment. Su Yozhen's angry voice resounded throughout the entire torture chamber. Although it was said that there was no need to torture a doctor, seeing that Li Wenxiao was about to die, Su Yozhen would not be polite. He was still waiting to use this case to gain a foothold in the Ministry of Justice. On the road to Yangqindong, the convoy was caught by the Security Bureau. Then, Tiger's Mane told Yang Qindong in the carriage that Minister Wang Ji had taken action and obtained a large amount of evidence of Li Wenxiao's violation of the law. Young Master, Minister Wang has taken action, and the Ministry of Justice has also released Wang Si. At this time, he is heading towards the Wang mansion. Tiger's Mane's voice clearly came out and entered the ears of Yang Qindong, who was sitting in the carriage with his eyes closed. I know. Yang Qindong answered very simply. Since Wang Ji had understood his intentions and had already made his move, then with the power of Wang Ji, the evidence he had gathered should be enough to keep an eye on Li Wenxiao. There was nothing for him to worry about. Previously, Yang Qindong knew that the information obtained from the Security Bureau was limited. He was afraid that he would not be able to kill Li Wenxiao with one blow. However, he still did it because he believed that Wang Ji would definitely take action after knowing what he had done. If he couldn't even see it, he wouldn't have been able to stay in the position of Minister of Personnel for more than 10 years. Since Wang Ji had made his move, Li Wenxiao would definitely die. This matter could be put aside for the time being. Some things needed to ferment for a period of time before they could be dealt with. Thinking about it, that way, they would be able to reap greater rewards. Tiger's Mane, in the name of this young master, quickly informed Commander Gao Xiong that he can take action. Understood, young master. Tiger's Mane replied and rode away. Leaving Yang Qindong alone in the carriage, he muttered to himself. Since you can't see the faces of some people clearly, then I'll give you a lesson. After experiencing inhumane treatment, Li Wenxiao also enjoyed many of the torture instruments that he was already familiar with. In the end, he spat out and confessed to many of the things written on the confession paper. When Su Yozhen received Li Wenxiao's confession, it was already the morning of the second day. Although he didn't sleep much this night, it seemed that everything was worth it to be able to achieve such a result. Of course, what made Su Yozhen even more excited was that after a night of torture, Li Wenxiao's psychological defenses had completely collapsed. He really said whatever he wanted to say, and in the end, he even accused many people, including the matter of him sending money to Minister of Justice Yu Shiyue. It added up to more than 20,000 taels of silver. According to the law of the Ming Dynasty, which was the rule set by Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang, if an official embezzled 60 taels of silver, he would be punished. One could imagine what the consequences of 20,000 taels of silver would be. This was equivalent to a huge bomb. Although Su Yozhen was a little excited, he didn't lose his head. After thinking it over, he didn't directly report it in an official document. Instead, he secretly told Jining the matter. At the same time, he also had someone tell the secret agents of the Security Bureau to tell the Duke of Loyalty and Courage what he had done. Yang Qindong learned of Su Yozhen's gains and his choice at noon the next day. In the study, after Tiger's Mane reported Su Yozhen's actions, he tried to say, "Young master, why didn't Sir Su report this to the court? Why didn't he ask for permission before doing this? Should we give him a warning?" The warning Tiger's Mane spoke of was naturally to give Su Yozhen a good beating. This person had relied on the young master's help to get to where he was today. Now that he had a bit of power and merit, he dared to act first and report later. This trend could not be allowed to continue. He did the right thing. Faced with Tiger's Mane's advice, Yang Qindong smiled and shook his head. Sir Su told Jining the news as soon as possible. That was the right thing to do. If it was delayed, it wouldn't be good. All right, let him handle this matter. The reason Yang Qindong trusted Su Yozhen so much and didn't blame him at all was because he had his own thoughts. Su Yozhen was one of the most powerful officials in history. Although his reputation wasn't good, his political skills and foresight were unquestionable. Since he had done this, he naturally had his own reasons. Furthermore, Yang Qindong could see that Su Yozhen had just entered the Ministry of Justice. If he removed Yu Shiyue now, based on his qualifications, he might not be able to take the position of minister. If he couldn't achieve this goal, then what good would it do to expose this matter? Rather than not being able to kill someone with one strike, it was better to wait a little longer and hang the blade high up. This could produce unexpected results. Moreover, once this matter was out, Yu Shiyue and the people behind him should be the ones having a headache. He only needed to wait and see how the other party would react. Yang Qindong understood Su Yozhen's actions. In the palace, after Jining received Su Yozhen, she was full of praise for his actions and methods. Good, very good. Sir Su, you did well. How about this? I will report this matter to the emperor. As for the specifics, you can go back and listen to the letter. She held Li Wenxiao's confession in her hand. Although Jining was angry, she was still very happy that Su Yozhen had reported to her first. This official will take his leave. Su Yozhen also knew that Jining probably had a lot of things to do now. He didn't stay any longer and even gave up the opportunity to flatter her alone. He left decisively. After Su Yozhen left, Jining thought for a moment and then went straight to Zhu Qiyu's office hall. Zhu Qiyu was still a part-time emperor. At least he was very diligent. Most of his time was spent dealing with political matters. When he saw Jining appear in front of him with a serious expression, he instinctively felt that something was wrong. He asked, "Beloved official Jin, did something happen?" "Yes, Your Majesty. Just now, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice came and gave me these." As she spoke, Jining respectfully presented the confession she had just received to Zhu Qiyu. Then she explained, "This is Li Wenxiao's confession. If everything is true, I'm afraid that Sir Yu Shiyue will no longer be able to hold the position of Minister of Justice." "It's that serious?" Zhu Qiyu, who was flipping through the confession, heard this and his eyes widened. "Yes, it's that serious. It's because of this that Su Yozhen didn't say it publicly in court. Instead, he found me in private and told me this. Your Majesty, you see. Jining nodded and spoke very seriously. Yu Shiyue can't be touched now. Zhu Qiyu shook his head decisively. His expression was very resolute. This was basically what Jining had expected. Yu Shiyue could continue to hold the position of Minister of Justice because he had gained Zhu Qiyu's trust. Although the current situation seemed to be much more stable, the external threat had not been completely eliminated. Before this, it was basically impossible to make the hearts of the people calm down. Thus, it was time to display the wisdom of the Daizong Emperor by choosing the type of officials and appointing the type of officials. Yu Shiyue was one of the officials who supported Zhu Qiyu's camp. If such a person was to be taken down, one could imagine how the hearts of the others would waver. Not to mention, this was not long after Yang Chendong had a conflict with him. If he were to be taken down, it would only increase the prestige of the Duke of Loyalty. From then on, there would be very few people who would dare to go against Yang Chendong. If this were to happen, it would undoubtedly be a huge blow to the emperor's authority. Zhu Qiyu, who was gathering imperial power and preparing to make a big show of it, would definitely not allow such a thing to happen. Yes, you can't touch him. Jining hurriedly repeated from the side. How long can Su Yozhen keep this matter under wraps? Although Zhu Qiyu did not want to touch Yu Shiyue, he knew that since the matter had already happened and was being watched by two important officials, Yang Chendong and Wang Ji, it was obviously impossible to pretend that nothing had happened. As the emperor, although he had many privileges, he still had to be fair. If he was too biased towards one side, not only would it not convince the public, it would also cause trouble. This, it's hard to say. Unless something big happens, I'm afraid that many people are keeping an eye on this case. Jining had a troubled expression on her face. He also knew that it was not the right time to touch Yu Shiyue. However, whether it was Yang Chendong or Wang Ji, who had provided evidence later, which one of them was easy to deal with? Jinning's answer allowed Zhu Qiyu to see a glimmer of hope. Very good, then come up with something else to attract everyone's attention. Didn't the Duke of Loyalty beat up the Japanese envoys yesterday? Because of this, there were even censors who wrote impeachment memorials, but I suppressed them all. Now, contact more censors and have them impeach the Duke of Loyalty and divert everyone's attention. Also, privately inform Yu Shiyue. He will know how to suppress this matter. Chapter 277. With Yu Shiyue's status as the Minister of the Ministry of Justice, even if Li Wenxiao's case was handled by the Ministry of Justice, he should know how to minimize the impact and extricate himself from it without needing anyone to tell him what to do. As long as Li Wenxiao went back on his words and refused to admit to what he had said about Yu Shiyue, the matter could be reduced to a small matter. At the very least, the Minister of Justice could be saved. Your Majesty is wise. Jining hadn't thought of a better idea, but when she heard Zhu Qiyu's suggestion, her eyes immediately lit up. Previously, Zhu Qiyu didn't want to touch Yang Chendong because he wanted to see how the Japanese envoy would react before making a decision. However, now that Yu Shiyue's incident had happened, all of his plans were about to be disrupted. Using this matter to divert everyone's attention was a feasible move. Very good. Official Jean, go ahead and do it. You can contact more people and say that it's our will. Zhu Qiyu rubbed his forehead with a pained expression. Using officials to deal with officials was one of the most common tactics used by the imperial power. After all, there were only so many people at the top. If one wanted to rise to the top, not only did they need to have ability and intelligence, they also needed to have good opportunities and a good position. This was the fundamental reason why other officials were willing to lay their hands on their colleagues. Only when others fell would you have a chance to rise to the top, right? However, Zhu Qiyu didn't know that it was too early to use the imperial censor to touch Yang Chendong. On the contrary, it was equivalent to doing him a great favor. After obtaining Zhu Qiyu's permission, Jining left excitedly. She quickly found the Minister of Revenue Jin Lian, the Minister of War Yi Ming, the Minister of Works Shi Pu, and the Marquis of Wuxia Xianxia. After they learned of the emperor's intentions, they each used their own power to have the officials who listened to them write impeachment memorials. The busiest of them all was the imperial censor of the right, Qin Yi. With the position of imperial censor of the left vacant, Qin Yi naturally became the head of the imperial censor. He managed the specific matters of the imperial censor's memorials. That very afternoon, more than 70% of the imperial censors submitted memorials to the throne. They were all talking about the same thing. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage had destroyed the Japanese diplomatic mission's encampment, tore down the courtyard door, and whipped the envoy. The imperial censors unanimously agreed that the Great Ming Dynasty was a great country and should have an incomparably broad mind and magnanimity. Using force to suppress the envoys of other countries like this was really unacceptable. It was a loss of face for the Great Ming Dynasty and should be severely punished. With so many imperial censors participating at the same time, the news quickly spread to the ears of all the ministers. In the Hu estate, as Yang Qindong's father-in-law, Hu Jiangning immediately went to his father's study when he heard the news. There, he met with the Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao. Hu Xiao naturally knew what his son meant by rashly barging in. "You're already so old, yet you're still so rash. Don't you know what it means to act when something big happens?" "Yes, father. I was wrong, but with so many people impeaching Qindong, I'm really worried that something bad will happen." Hu Jiangning first admitted his mistake, then expressed his worries in one breath. He was both satisfied and apprehensive that his daughter had married young Qindong. He was satisfied because there were no outstanding young talents like young Qindong. It was indeed a great blessing for his daughter to be able to marry him. However, at the same time, it was precisely because young Qindong was too young and his contributions were too great that this father-in-law had always been worried about him. It was said that the tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. However, why didn't his son-in-law know how to restrain himself? Wasn't it good for him to obediently stay in the Yang family manor with money and power? Why did he have to come out and cause trouble and stick his foot in everything? Now, he was so daring that he even dared to hit the envoys of other countries. It was no wonder that the imperial censors would jointly impeach him. What will happen? Do you think that your son-in-law is you? Don't you use your brain when something happens? Don't you have any composure? Hu Xiao said calmly. He held the position of minister and had been an official for many years. As an old court official, he had long been used to big storms and big waves. He could see through the matter in front of him at a glance. Why didn't anyone say anything about what happened yesterday during the morning assembly? Why did it take an entire day for there to be any movement? If someone said that there was no problem at all, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Thinking about it, there was also news that Su Youzhen's interrogation of Li Wenxiao had yielded results. Hu Xiao figured everything out. This was clearly a diversion method, and the target could only be Yang Qindong. Since it was a diversion method, there was no clear target. If that was the case, what was there to worry about? It was nothing more than when the matter blew up, Yang Qindong would stand out and apologize, and the matter would be settled. Of course, it wasn't that there wasn't any worry. That was whether this grandson-in-law, Yang Qindong, would be able to lower his noble head when he was young and successful. That was what he was worried about. That's enough. This time, Qindong was only implicated. If you're worried, go to the Yang village and tell him that it was me who said that he should lower his head when he should. It's not a big deal, and he won't lose a piece of meat. Hu Xiao felt that he still needed to remind Yang Qindong, so he gave the task to his son. "Oh, I understand, father." Although Hu Jiangning didn't understand what was going on, he didn't say much. But since he had said so, it shouldn't be a big deal. So, after agreeing, he prepared his horse and went straight to the Yang village. In the study of the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, who was sitting there, let out a long sigh. With his connections, he already knew that Li Wenxiao had admitted to everything and even exposed Shengguan Yushiyue. Following that, he heard that the imperial censors had jointly impeached Yang Qindong. Regarding this, he made a difficult choice. This matter was clearly caused by his grandson, Wang Si. Logically speaking, he should be on Yang Chendong's side. Faced with the imperial censor's impeachment, he only needed to expose Li Wenxiao's matter during the morning court session tomorrow. He believed that everyone's attention would quickly be diverted. That way, the Duke of Loyalty should be fine. However, he would have to face the Emperor's dissatisfaction, and even Yueyu's faction would target him. If he angered the Emperor, he would be walking on thin ice when doing things in the future. If he wasn't careful, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. On the other hand, if he didn't do anything for his own position, Yang Chendong would be in a lot of trouble. At the very least, he had to publicly apologize. Afterwards, he would have to face the punishment of the acting emperor. As for how far he would go, he couldn't guess. One was doing nothing for his own sake, while the other was putting himself in danger for the sake of returning a favor. At this moment, Wang Ji really didn't know what to do. The world was bustling with activity for profit, and the world was bustling with activity for profit. Wang Ji had been an official for many years. Naturally, he understood the principle of putting himself out of harm's way. However, it wasn't as if he didn't know how to repay kindness. In the end, he made a painful decision. That was, he informed all the imperial censors who were on good terms with him to quietly observe the situation and not participate in this matter. However, at the same time, he didn't reveal that he had evidence against Li Wenxiao and that Li Wenxiao had accused Yueyue. In short, he didn't help either side and had no intention of participating in this matter. Not helping either side was, in fact, helping Yang Chendong. After all, compared to the imperial power and the four great ministers, it was very rare for Wang Ji to be neutral. When Yang Chendong learned of Wang Ji's performance, he nodded in satisfaction in his bedroom. This was a good start. If he continued to maintain this, he was confident that one day, this minister of personnel would be of use to him. As for the impeachment of the imperial censors, Yang Chendong didn't care about them at all. Furthermore, it wouldn't be long before he used his actions to give these people a hard slap in the face. Deputy Imperial Censor Dong Chunhua of the Imperial Censorate, a rank 3 official. Seeing that there was no imperial censor of the left in the Imperial Censorate, his desire to rise was very strong. Furthermore, he had enough qualifications. All he lacked now was an opportunity. He took out a lot of his belongings to exchange for banknotes from the Yang family bank and gave them to eunuch Jining. He, who had paved the way, was just waiting for an opportunity. And now, the opportunity had appeared. Such a large-scale impeachment of a duke was incited by the emperor. The four great ministers and the military's governor Shi Heng were also involved. If he performed well, he would be able to rise to a higher position in the future. Coincidentally, the imperial censor of the right, Chen Yi, didn't seem to be very enthusiastic about this matter. Dong Chunhua, who saw the opportunity, took the initiative to stand up and integrate the memorials with the imperial censors. He became the happiest and most enthusiastic person in this incident. During the morning court session the next day, a group of more than 30 imperial censors, led by Dong Chunhua, stood up at the same time in the imperial palace's conference hall. They said that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, Yang Chendong, was extremely daring. He beat up the Japanese envoy and destroyed the Great Ming's image. Dozens of people said similar crimes one after another. It really felt like everyone was kicking a man who was down. The intensity of their words and sharpness of their words made it seem like Yang Chendong was the biggest scourge. If he wasn't eliminated, the entire Great Ming would feel uneasy. Zhu Qiyu, the head of defense, sat high on the throne. His expression seemed calm, but he was very happy in his heart. Even if Yang Chendong had made a lot of contributions, when the wind changed slightly, the feeling that a storm was coming could easily knock down any subject. All along, Zhu Qiyu didn't say anything, but in his heart, he was afraid of this subject whose contributions were so high that they could shake the emperor. This kind of feeling made him unable to eat or drink. It also made him unable to grasp the hearts of his subjects. He wasn't sure how many of his subjects would stand on his side if he really targeted him. If he really became a loner, then this emperor wouldn't be far from stepping down. Chapter 278. But today, it seemed that the result was much better than he had imagined. There were actually so many officials who opposed Yang Chendong. Looking at it this way, once the time was right, eliminating this person should not cause too much opposition and instability in the court. Under Zhu Qiyu's gaze, with a hint of encouragement, the imperial censors of the imperial censorate tried their best to perform. In particular, the left deputy imperial censor, Dong Chunhua, did his best to perform. From his words, the Duke of Loyalty seemed to have become a malignant tumor and the embodiment of evil. If this person was not punished, the entire Great Ming Dynasty would not be able to see the light and hope. Not only did the memorial belittle Yang Chendong, but it also emphasized the friendly relationship between the Ming Dynasty and Japan. Any officials who played a bad role in the diplomatic relations between the two countries should be punished severely. In order to express the goodwill of the Great Ming Dynasty, the former Japanese envoy, Aoki Yuki, should be released from prison. Dong Chunhua's proposal quickly received the support of more officials. It must be said that Kimura Yoshida had spent a lot of money during this period of time, and most of the people who stood up to speak were people who had received benefits before. Naturally, this time, they would do their best to perform. The situation in the court was one-sided, and the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong, was described as a piece of rat shit. It seemed that because of his appearance, the Great Ming Dynasty had been humiliated. At this moment, most people seemed to have selectively forgotten that when Walla's army attacked the city, he was the one who stepped forward to repel the enemy. Hu Shao did not speak, and Wang Ji did not speak. However, in such a violent situation, the silence of the same minister did not play much of a role. On the contrary, some people thought that they were afraid and wanted to protect themselves. Following that, the accusations became even more severe. Some people even suggested that the Duke of Loyalty should publicly apologize and be expelled from his fief. A public apology was equivalent to Yang Chendong admitting that he had done something wrong. As a result, the prestige and popularity that he had accumulated over many days would be greatly affected. It would even have a great impact on the reputation of Yang Chendong's bank. If this was really done, the efforts of more than a year would be completely ruined at this moment. From this, it could be seen how vicious the person who made this suggestion was. Expelling Yang Chendong back to the fief of Jiangning Prefecture in Fujian was tantamount to kicking him out from the center of power. If this was really the case, it would be difficult for him to make a comeback. Perhaps in the future, he could only be an idle guogong for the rest of his life. It would be difficult for him to meddle in the specific affairs and future direction of the Great Ming Dynasty. The two suggestions were like two sharp swords, pointing straight at Yang Chendong's ribs. If all of them passed, the consequences could be imagined. Your Majesty, please reconsider. After all, the Duke of Loyalty had saved Yingzong. If he were to leave now, it would be pushing him away, and the consequences would be unimaginable. Upon hearing that his grandson-in-law was to leave the capital, the silent Hu Shao finally couldn't hold himself back any longer and stepped forward in shock. For the sake of his grandson-in-law, he had even brought up Zhu Qizhen's name in public. This in itself was somewhat disrespectful. But he was still an old official of several dynasties and an important official used by Yingzong, so it was reasonable for him to say such a thing. That's right. Your Majesty, please reconsider, Minister of Personnel Wang Ji seconded in his shock. If he admitted his wrongs today, he could use other matters tomorrow to regain his face, but once he left this place, it would be very difficult for him to make a comeback, and he truly might not be able to recover from this setback. When Zhu Qiyu heard the suggestions of his subordinates, he truly was somewhat tempted. If Yang Chendong really could leave the capital, he would have a chance to slowly turn the industries he had left behind into his own, and he might even be able to establish a business relationship with the mercenaries. He remembered that when Jining had represented him to discuss business with the mercenary commander Ling Feng, the other party had said that as long as the Duke of Loyalty remained in the capital, his rights would not be transferred. But what if he was allowed to leave? Could it be that his chance had come? If he could replace Yang Chendong, then whether it was in business or military, he would be able to rise to a higher level. How could he not be tempted? However, as soon as Hu Shao and Wang Ji stepped forward, this desire was immediately extinguished. It was for no other reason than the fact that the Great Ming was no longer a Great Ming where power was concentrated in the hands of the emperor alone. Now, there was the Southern Ming, and his imperial brother, Zhu Qizhen, was stationed in Nanjing. If he chased away Yang Qindong, it would undoubtedly be the same as chasing him into his imperial brother's embrace. Once he obtained this person, who knew what heaven-shaking things his imperial brother would do? While his heart trembled, Zhu Qiyu didn't dare to let Yang Qindong leave without sufficient assurance. Thus, he decisively made his decision. Enough. Although the Duke of Loyalty was wrong, he shouldn't have left. How about this, Minister Dong? Go to Yangjia village and have him publicly apologize to appease the anger of the Japanese envoy. Also, in order to show the sincerity of our Great Ming's relationship with our neighbors, the Japanese envoy, Aoki Yuki, who made a serious mistake before, can also be released. However, we must remind him to restrain his actions in the future. This is the Great Ming, and he can't kill indiscriminately. In the end, the emperor didn't have the intention to chase away Yang Qindong. He chose to take a step back. It was inevitable that some of the officials would be disappointed, but in any case, this time they could force Yang Qindong to publicly apologize. With this beginning, they could slowly make plans in the future. Breaking his fortress wouldn't be easy. Your Majesty is wise. All the officials seemed to have thought of this point and immediately praised Zhu Qiyu's wisdom. When the court was dismissed, the deputy imperial censor of the Ministry of Justice, Dong Chunhua, went straight to Yangjia village with great fanfare. Dong Chunhua's face was flushed red. At this time, he was extremely excited. There were so many officials, and even Shengguan Chen Yi was in the imperial censorate. But in the end, the matter was still handed over to him. Didn't this already show the emperor's trust in him and that he was about to be put in an important position? When he thought about how he could finally see the ladder to becoming a second-rank official and how he could bring glory to his ancestors, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but smile. Official Dong, please wait. Just as Dong Chunhua left the palace and was about to walk to the main street, a shout came from behind him. When he turned around, his face showed a flattered expression. So it's official E, official U, official Jean, and official Sure. Dong Chunhua couldn't help but show this kind of expression. Suddenly, 4 officials came together for him. How could this kind of scene not make people excited? In the field of government, the hierarchy had always been very strict. What kind of officials could walk together, and what kind of officials could talk and laugh together, all of these were very particular. For example, a second-rank official absolutely wouldn't condescend to talk and laugh with someone whose rank was lower than his. That would only be degrading his status. But now, for second-rank officials, especially under the premise that the cabinet had already disappeared, the status of these 4 people could only be higher than before. How could Dong Chunhua, who was only a third-rank official, not be excited when they all appeared together? The 4 officials walked in front of Dong Chunhua. First, they looked at him with a gaze of praise. Their gazes clearly revealed the fact that it wouldn't be long before everyone was on equal footing. It was because they saw the effort this person had put in this matter and the reward he might receive that they condescended to come here. Of the 4 officials, the first to speak was the Minister of War, Yi Ming. Perhaps because Yang Qindong's appearance had stolen too much of the Ministry of War's limelight, he was the one who hated the Duke of Loyalty to the bones the most. Official Dong, are you preparing to go to Yang village to announce the decree? Dong Chunhua bowed and said, Minister Yi's words are correct. Oh, but what does official Dong plan to do? Yi Ming asked with an expression that said he had already guessed it. Of course it's to announce the emperor's decree. Dong Chunhua had an expression that said, you know what I'm talking about. But after he finished speaking, he noticed that Yi Ming and the other 3 officials all had serious expressions. He suddenly thought of something. What? Do the 4 officials believe that the Duke of Loyalty would dare to defy the decree? As soon as he said this, he thought of Yang Qindong's young and promising performance, as well as his past actions. His expression immediately became flustered. Others wouldn't dare to defy the decree, but this Duke of Loyalty who had made great contributions was not easy to deal with. That might not be the case. Yi Ming shook his head lightly. Although Yang Chendong was bold and reckless, in the end, he was still an official of the great Ming dynasty. He might not really dare to do something as reprehensible as defying the decree. Of course, if he really dared to do so, he would be taking the initiative to give others a handle. As such, there were thousands of ways to deal with him. Seeing that Yi Ming had rejected the idea, Dong Chunhua's heart relaxed. At the same time, he couldn't help but ask, since he doesn't dare to defy the decree, what else is there to worry about? Is it worth the 4 officials to remind this official? Hee, we're here to remind you. I don't know if official Dong has thought about it, but since you want the Duke of Loyalty to admit his mistake, of course, the bigger the commotion, the better. However, the court assembly has just ended, and presumably, the news hasn't spread yet. If you ask him to admit his mistakes so early, wouldn't it benefit some people? The Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, had a smile on his face as if he was very familiar with Dong Chunhua. Expand the influence. As someone who could become the deputy imperial censor of the left, he was naturally incomparably intelligent. After this reminder, he quickly thought of something, and then his eyes revealed a look of surprise. He only wanted to embarrass Yang Chendong, and it was a good opportunity to show off his strength. However, he forgot that even if the other party admitted his mistake, it was still possible to make a fuss about it. How was he going to admit his mistake? The degree of recognition and the kind of impact it would have could be manipulated artificially. Thinking of this, Dong Chunhua couldn't help but sigh at the experience of the 4 officials. His face also showed an expression of humility as he asked for advice. This official is slow-witted, please enlighten me. Seeing that Dong Chunhua understood everyone's intentions, Yi Ming and the other 3 laughed and then said, since official Dong has said so, if we don't give a suggestion, wouldn't it be unreasonable? How about this, if we cause a lot of trouble, why don't we find a place to arrange it and make a good plan? This suggestion quickly received a response from everyone. Soon, the 5 of them brought the servants of the residents out of the imperial city, chatting and laughing, and went straight to a nearby restaurant. You're tuning in to the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.